Good evening. I call to order the public hearing for the revision to the 2022-2023 budget. It's Monday, August 8th, 2022, and it's 6 o'clock. Public comments. The public hearing is being held to receive comments from the public. And we have one comment. Miss Christy Ahrens, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak to the budget.
President Hatcher, members of the board, and Dr. Monroe. My name is Christy Ahrens, and I'm a parent to 2 children attending Black Mountain Elementary School. We love it there. Mr. Owsley and the teachers really embody what it means to be a family. I'm here to express my opinion on the additional funds received by CCUSD due to the passing of the state budget in June. I would like to start with my sincere thank you to the board for volunteering your time to better our community. And I know you have our students' best interest at heart. I also want you to know that I am 100% in support of the M&O override. I know that our district is in need of additional funding. That being said, I am only comparing the CCUSD 22-23 budget passed on June 27th to the proposed budget being presented tonight. It is such great news that the state is appropriating $1.4 million more to the CCUSD M&O fund for this school year. In analyzing the variances, an additional $502,000, which represents 36% of the additional funds, was allocated to other M&O expenditures, and $907,000, which represents 64%, to salaries and benefits for all staff, not just teachers. While I think every position is important and plays their role in our school system, I'm advocating for more funds get allocated towards the teachers' salaries. I encourage you to ask how much of the $1.1 million increase presented tonight is going to the teacher's salary. I think at this point in time, if you were able to pass the budget in June with the expenditures as is, the majority of the additional funds should go to the instructional teachers' salaries. Show CCUSD parents, staff, parents, and voters that when given the additional funds, you will spend it wisely and are serious about raising teachers' salaries. Their heart and their hard work is invaluable to me and my family. While this is a very small step for Arizona public education, at least it's a step in the right direction. I am very hopeful for our children and their future here in Cave Creek. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. There are no other comments for the budget, so is there a motion to adjourn the public hearing?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. The public hearing for the revision to the 2022-2023 budget is adjourned. Next item, 2.1. I call to order the public hearing for the Cave Creek Unified School District's virtual instructional time model for the 2022-2023 school year. Again, it's Monday, August 8, 2022, and it is 6:05. The public hearing is being held to receive public comments. We don't have any comments relating to that. So, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved. Second.
Okay. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? The motion carries. The public hearing for the CCUSD's virtual instructional time model for the 2022-2023 school year is adjourned. I call to order the business meeting of the Cave Creek Unified School District number 93 Governing Board. It's Monday, August 8, 2022, and it is now about 6:06 p.m. Roll call. All 5 board members are present, and there is a quorum. Present from the cabinet are Dr. Monroe, Dr. Hendrickson, Dr. Jensen, Ms. Marcy Rodriguez, and Ms. Nancy Diab-Scott. Item 3.3, formal adoption of the agenda. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded to adopt the agenda as presented. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. The agenda is adopted as presented. 3.4, call to fill out forms for call to the public. We do have a couple, so there will be an admonition read in a few minutes. 3.5, Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
3.6, President's Report. I stopped by the Kiwanis event, now I can't remember, I think it's less than a month ago, where the community could bring school supplies and kids could meet their principals and dunk their principals, and that's always a neat activity. I attended the Chamber of Commerce, not in the district capacity, but I did hear Dr. Monroe's presentation for the override, and Danny, right? Is his name? Yeah. Danny, also the owner of Harold's, made a really good presentation too. So that was very informative. I volunteered at Desert Willow for the first day of school and did a lot of cafeteria duty, and that was fun. And I want to give a shout out to Miss Jeffer, a kindergarten teacher at Desert Willow. By 10:30, an hour and a half into school, she's kindergarten, so you can just imagine all these little people. And she had those kids lining up, sitting down. I mean, I couldn't believe the classroom management in an hour and a half with 5-year-olds. So shout out to Miss Jeffer. And just welcome back to all of our kids and our staff and teachers, and I hope it's a great year. And that's it for me. 3.7, board comments. Board?
I just wanted to welcome everybody back, the teachers. Looking forward to a great year. A lot of good feedback from the teachers, especially the new ones coming on, and the students. So I just wanted to wish the best of all to everybody.
As with Member Hatcher, I also attended the Chamber of Commerce event last week. It actually was a breakfast. I was there representing Cave Creek Youth Football and Cheerleading, but also had the privilege of hearing the M&O presentation from Dr. Monroe and Ms. Rodriguez. So it was good to see they had a very full house. There was about 70 people at the breakfast. So, and this was the local chamber, so that's our local business owners, and it was a great group. So, and then I'd also like to echo Member Fortney, welcoming everybody back, staff, teachers, and our great students. So.
Well, as a parent, the last 2 weeks have been a whirlwind. I've been to Cactus Shadows twice, Sonoran Trails for their trail days, and Black Mountain. It's fun to see familiar faces. Even at Black Mountain, it's fun to see some of our teachers that have come back. That was really fun to see some teachers that had been gone and were back. It's just exciting when you have that connection there. And I guess that's it. It's just busy, really busy, but kids are excited. Buses are running smooth, so.
Oh, I just want to welcome everybody back, students, staff, new staff. It's going to be an exciting year, and I've heard lots of great things going on the campuses already, so best wishes to everybody.
Thank you, Board. Item 3.8, Superintendent's Report. Dr. Court Monroe.
Yeah, President Hatcher, members of the board, we are on day 6 of school, believe it or not, and we're off to a great start of our second week. Overall, I'm happy to report it's been very smooth. Obviously, there's a lot of routines that are being formed once again, but as I was able to visit all the schools the first and second day, it's just so rewarding to see the teaching and learning already going on. The last day of school happened last year, and we're snapping right back into it. So I appreciate the teachers, the staff, the leaders who have pulled that off, and we're excited for things to come. I want to shout out Mr. Santina. He's actually here tonight. He's our Director of Facilities and Construction. Without fail, before the first day of school in Arizona, there's always a monsoon. So we always have everything manicured and looking good. And so I'd like to tell you about 4:30 in the morning before the first day of school, Mike and his crew were out at Cactus Shadows High School because we had sidewalks that had washed out and they were just covered with dirt. And so I appreciate them getting out there to clear the sidewalks. And then they went over to Sonoran Trails and the elementary schools after that. So the schools were sparkling to receive the kids. So thank you, Mike, and your staff. I'd like to congratulate Xander Simmons. Xander's a junior at Cactus Shadows High School. He was accepted to the Arizona State Governor's Office of Youth, Faith, and Family. This is basically a leadership program, and Xander will represent Cave Creek Unified and Cactus Shadows High School as an ambassador and a leader in the kind of the greater state community. So we congratulate Xander. We're really proud of him. I'd also like to congratulate Cactus Shadows High School sophomore Aviva Merchandani. We've heard her name before. Aviva placed 5th place in the 2022 U.S. Kids Golf European Championship Tournament. So that's for girls 15 to 18 years old. And it was held at the Royal Musselburgh Golf Course in Scotland over the summer. And she finished 5th, so we are proud of her. And as the board is aware and members of the community, we'd like to congratulate our CCUSD students who played in the Cactus Foothills Little League Major Softball All-Stars. I tuned in on ESPN Plus and rooted for our girls from afar. They advanced to their 2nd straight West Regional Championship over the summer. Also, not to go unnoticed, our 9 to 10-year-old baseball team won the District 3 title in Arizona, and they finished 3rd out of 14 teams in our Arizona State tournament. So we have athletes, and not only do we have smart students, but we have students who volunteer and excel at sports, which is fantastic. And then the last thing I'd like to mention that the board is aware of is Friday, September 23rd is the day we'd like everyone to circle on their calendar. That is the Cactus Shadows High School football game. It's our senior resident community appreciation night at Falcon Field. So residents who are over 55 from Rio Verde, Cave Creek, Carefree, Phoenix, Scottsdale from our district, they're invited to attend this football game for free. There's preferential seating in the end zone. There's a hot dog meal with a drink that will be provided by our Falcons Athletic Club. You need a ride? We'll even pick you up in an air-conditioned bus. So we'd really like the community to feel welcome and come out to one of our Friday Night Lights events. And for those who are interested, just need to RSVP to Nancy Scott at her email address. And that's my board report.
That sounds like a lot of good stuff. Number 4, presentation of awards for schools and departments. There are none. 5.1, call to the public. So there are 2 speakers, and I'll read the admonition. According to ARS 38-431.01H, governing board members may not discuss or take legal action on matters raised during an open call to the public. The only allowable responses a governing board member may make are: number 1, board member may respond if there is a direct criticism of the board member. 2, board member may direct staff to look into a matter. Or 3, board member can ask to have this item placed on a future agenda. Speakers need to be mindful of what they say when presenting to the board. Inappropriate comments could be considered slanderous. So our speakers have 3 minutes each, and our first speaker is Brooksy McQuain. Did I say that correctly?
Hello. Let me get my notes up here. I'm Brooksy McQuain. I'm a student at Cactus Shadows High School, and I have 4 siblings, one who goes to Cactus Shadows, and the rest go to Lone Mountain Elementary School. Today I want to bring up the subject of the student dress code at Cactus Shadows. I believe that it's being targeted towards our female students because I'm not seeing enough men wearing inappropriate shirts being dress coded more than females. Like, I've seen like girls be dress coded for just like a sleeveless top, and then men wearing like Playboy shirts and nude woman, and they didn't get dress coded till like last block. So I mean, I just want to bring that up and see if we can like change it around a little bit. And just another topic, really short, is the faculty at the school kind of passive aggressive towards us when it comes to like the ID thing. I think it's like a big deal because someone like stuck on campus last year or whatever, but like they could just like, I don't know, be nicer about it, because I feel a lot of passive aggressiveness towards myself and other students. And that's just going to conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, I'm not sure.
Hi there, my name is Anat, and my daughter is a senior at Cactus Shadows High School. Imagine it's August 1st. You are a freshman starting your first day of high school. You're nervous and excited. Or you're a senior starting your last day. You are waving at a friend when the security guard shouts at you and asks you to show her your shirt. She eyes you up and down. You are firmly reprimanded for being out of dress code and warned that if it happens again, you will not be allowed to enter campus until you go to the office. The irony is that the dress code policy for CCUSD states that the district prides itself on providing an orderly and respectful environment, and that its purpose is to provide a safe, positive school campus that is conducive to learning. The dress code, as currently enforced, is not conducive to learning when students lose instructional time to be disciplined for clothing. Having students change into school T-shirts has a scarlet letter effect to it. The policy is not respectful, nor is it positive when girls are looked over as they enter the school grounds. Enforcing the dress code should not result in discipline and body shaming. No student should be told to lift their arms or measure the length of their shorts with their fingertips. This approach is damaging to the student's sense of self and to the teacher-student relationship. The expectations for students to follow the dress code needs to be met with respectful expectations of its enforcement. I am requesting that the board and Dr. Monroe update the policy and its processes as soon as possible, starting with training staff members on how to apply and enforce the code. Staff members can be taught body-positive language and practice empathy in order to speak to those that are being questioned. This would result in little impact to the learning environment and the students' self-confidence. A new committee representing our students, parents, and staff members should be formed to help create a new and improved policy that not only will alleviate any anxiety and anger that our students are experiencing, but will make the enforcement of it easier on our staff members, especially our teachers, who should not be burdened by it. Let's find a way together to make an enforcement policy that is positive for our students, not a negative. And I'm super proud of these students who are here with us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is that it for the? Dr. Monroe, can you look into the issues that both of these speakers brought up, the dress code and the policing of the student IDs, and report back to the board at the dais?
Sure. Happy to do that.
Thank you. Number 6, presentations, information, reports. 6.1, 3-year district fiscal action plan and superintendent goals, presented by Dr. Court Monroe.
President Hedger, members of the board. For the next few minutes, we're going to talk about our 3-year district fiscal action plan, Mrs. Rodriguez and I, as well as review proposed superintendent goals for the 22 to 23 school year. As the board will remember, at the last board meeting, the board was able to give quite a bit of input on those goals, and so I was able to go back and rework, listen to the meeting minutes, read the meeting minutes, and submit a lot of that feedback that the board gave. Everything we do in our school district runs through our strategic plan. Obviously, our fiscal planning runs through effective operations, resources, and systems, but it impacts all the other areas, and the superintendent goals fall under the 5 priorities of our strategic plan. That's why they are all highlighted here. So for the next few minutes, that's what we're going to kind of discuss, and we'll answer board questions and have some dialogue near the end. So I want to remind the board of our wonderful tax rates in this area as a homeowner. In fact, for 2022, the average assessed value of a home is almost $600,000, $557,000. That homeowner on their primary and secondary taxes will save about $90 a year. The board will remember in past presentations regarding the override, that same homeowner would pay a little over $100 a year to pass that override. So I know that there's a small difference there, but that's almost a wash. So we're very blessed to live in such a wonderful community where our tax rates are so low. However, as the board is aware, looking at this chart, which the board has seen before, you can see some of our neighboring school districts as well as other successful school districts around Maricopa County, their tax rates, which are all higher than we are, their primary and secondary. And the most damning statistic here, or the most damning thing to look at, is the initials near those school districts, which illustrate those districts have bonds and a maintenance and operations override in place. So we have not for some time, which puts us at a competitive disadvantage. And so as we talk about our fiscal action planning, I want to create the scenario that we're really looking for long-term sustainable funding, how the state sets up our funding formula in Cave Creek Unified. So I'm very proud to say the board voted 5-0 unanimously to put an override on the ballot. An override in November is a way for a school district to generate additional revenue with local voter approval. Now, if you look at that middle paragraph, you'll see that there are 55 school districts in Maricopa County. 48 of them have an override in place. Out of the 7 that don't, 6 of them are under 760 students. So we have not had an override in place since 2007. You heard me talk about long-term funding. The reason I say that 5 to 7 years is long-term funding is this. If you think about when a student enters school in kindergarten, they are going to be in public schools for 13 years. An override would last about half of that. So a kindergartner who would go through school, halfway through their education, a community could renew an override, so the override would be in place for that whole student's career into schools, into graduation. And that's how the state has basically set up the rules, that if you want more funding, the local voters have to approve above and beyond what the state provides. The board is aware that bonds are another opportunity we have for long-term funding. Last year, we had a bond on the ballot. Well, here's some examples of what bonds are used for. Building improvements, technology, school buses, facilities, equipment, furniture, and fixtures. On the next slide, you'll see that we haven't had a bond for quite a while. 2014, we approved a bond for $30 million for those bullet points that you see there. All of the bond proceeds were spent by June 30th of 2020. So last year, the board voted to put a bond on the ballot for $40 million, and we lost that election out by 751 votes, and there was more than 22,000 votes cast. The focus of that bond, and the reason I tell you this is this will come up in our planning later in this meeting, is the focus of that bond was to technology refresh, to have up-to-date technology in the hands of our teachers and students, to have the necessary infrastructure and all those things that we need at the schools, health and safety upgrades, facility improvements, transportation, athletic facility improvements, and we were planning on paying off some of the debt service that we owe. Transportation is particularly important because anytime a bus breaks down, that is not good news. And currently our fleet is in need of new buses. However, we don't have long-term funding to be able to do that. As the superintendent, I'm committed to being very creative to find ways to take care of these things, with the priority being our teacher and staff pay. But I want the board to be aware that that hard decisions have to be made and maintenance has to be deferred on a lot of items where it shouldn't be. So I'm going to let Marcy talk through the next few slides, which talks about some of the creative and long-term things we were trying to do this year, next year, and the year after. A lot of that, remember, is contingent on this override in November. However, we'll be bringing to the board very hard decisions moving forward in case of an override not passing, and considering closing a school and redoing boundaries and limiting transportation for students. And hopefully we can, avoid those conversations, but we want to share with you kind of our action plan in doing some of those things. So, Mrs. Rodriguez.
Thank you, Dr. Monroe. President Hatcher, members of the board, I want to cover what we're going to do over the next 3 years to try to maintain the stability of the district financially. So one of the first things that, thank you, board, for approving the override election, will be on the ballot in November of this year. That will be something that is priority to happen this year, and then there, of course, will be contingency plans one way or the other with the passage or not of the override. But we continue to market the district in a positive way, to increase our enrollment, to bring students to the district. You'll see later on in the budget presentation that we are having some challenges in that area, and so we'll continue to do that. School Facilities Board, Mr. Santini here with us this evening, has been a phenomenal advocate for the district in receiving building renewal grants to keep the buildings running, to keep the AC on, the water heaters running, things like that. He's recently just got a couple of new approvals for some exterior paint, for some carpeting, things that the district is in badly need of in some of our schools. The gifts and donation, we have excellent community partners. We received a significant amount of a donation from the Kiwanis, which we greatly appreciate. That enabled us to replace some of the Chromebooks that were outdated, so much so that they couldn't even run the testing that we have to do required by the state. So that was greatly appreciated, that generous donation and many other generous donations. We also are members, and we do outreach with other community advocate organizations about changing the funding formula. We know that Arizona is one of the lowest funded states in the nation, and so we always look for ways to encourage our legislature, which they made some steps towards that this year, which we're very thankful for. The continuing for this year, tax credit drive, always a resource for revenues for extracurricular for the kids. We also have our preschool, which is self-funded. We are still working on the expenditures of the ESSER 3 money, which is part of the big federal grant that we received during COVID, over $3 million. A lot of those expenses, this year you'll be seeing them go towards staff retention, and then also for instructional materials to prevent some learning loss that some of our students may have experienced during COVID. E-rate monies, we have explored. Our new Director of Technology, Erica Celsi, has built a relationship with the person down at the Department of Education who oversees E-rate, and they have given her lots of good resources to be able to maximize those. And E-rate is used for technology type items. All of our internet connection is paid through E-rate, but there are other resources I believe that we could tap into to get some of our infrastructure possibly funded with those monies. And then one of the things that we're looking at this year is initiating a repurposing committee to look at our capacity and our enrollment and our facility use. This is something that we, since Dr. Moreau and I have been here, have talked about, and this is really a committee that we need to explore how our facilities are being used and the capacity that we have available in our schools. And then, of course, grant writing. We're writing grants all the time. Our ECS, our preschool, has taken advantage of some grants that were available to fund those programs, and we're very excited about the funds that they're bringing in to enhance that program in the preschool increase in the numbers. So that's this year. Now,
let me jump in,
Sure.
Mr. Rodriguez. Excuse me, as you go to the next year, I just wanted to point out to the board on number 11 is when we have this committee, and I don't know what it will be called, but there'll be committee reports done to the board because regardless of whether the passage of the override happens or whether it fails, there's just a need to study our capacity and the number of students and adults within the building and empty classrooms and spaces. Those are areas we have to light, we have to cool, and so across our district, we'd like to kind of get a good facility usage report. So before any big decisions are made, we can have very good data for the board to see that the projected savings that could happen. Does that mean closing a school? We don't know. It could very well. But we know we have very large facilities, and we have, I'd say, smaller student bodies in our facilities. So there would be reports to the board on that, and likely there'd be a third-party facilitator with some parents on that, with some experts, people that know a lot more about these kind of things than Marcy and I, so that we get good data for the board.
So moving forward then to next year, again, as I mentioned, contingency, potential passage or failure of the override and or a bond. That will be something that we'll look at moving into next year. Demographic study for our enrollment trends, and then again, still continuing to marketing and program for our students. Then there are some revenue resources that I had mentioned that ECS, our Educational Community Services, has taken advantage of. And then we will continue to have ESSER 3 money through the end of next year. So you're going to see a significant amount of ESSER 3 spent this year with some of the curriculum that we'll be purchasing, and then next year we'll be following up and finalizing the expenditure. As a reminder, that was about $3 million that we'll be spending in the next couple of years. And unfortunately, it can't be used to supplant, to cover any of the current cost. It has to be things that, we are using the money for the learning recovery for our students, if there was any learning loss, and then retaining our current staff.
Yeah, it's important to know, President Hatcher, members of the board, that there's lots of pots of money that we're responsible for, and there are strings attached and requirements to each one of those things. So oftentimes when I interact with people in the community, they say, wow, there is money flowing like honey in all these different pots. However, generally it can only be used for specific purposes. So if you go back to, let me go back to number 2, I also wanted to touch on that one. It's healthy for a school district every 2 or 3 years to do an updated demographic study, which is as close to a science as you're going to get about predicting what enrollment will be like. Now, we do know that our past demographic studies have showed a slow decline over 5 to 10 years in the area, and we know that housing cost. Lately, we know vouchers, we know school choice, we know families have a lot of choices. So next year would probably be a very apropos time with COVID in our rearview mirror, knowing the results of an override, to again initiate a demographic study and say, well, are we seeing growth? Are we going to see a bump here? What's this area going to look like? So that'll be something that will come up on the board's radar here early next year as well.
So in just continuing with next year, and some of our plans would be to continue that research on the repurposing, as Dr. Monroe has discussed, and then continue working with business partners to see what changes in school funding formula that we can help enact, grants, tax credit. You'll see a lot of these are the same as the prior year. We just continue to look for additional resources and how we can bring funds into the district to support our programs. Then moving then out to the third year, again, contingent upon the override, and then we need to look at our loss of enrollment. So we have some of that information for you this evening when I discuss budget with you in a minute. And then potentially repurposing some of our schools and our classrooms, and then continue to work with School Facilities Board. We know if we don't secure any additional resources for capital improvements and bonds, that we are going to rely more and more on the School Facilities Board to help us with our aging buildings. And then this is just some of the same, maximizing grants, tax credit, maximizing tuition based on our preschool program and our E-rate money.
One of the challenging things about the School Facilities Board is they don't fund athletic facilities. They don't fund buses. And so that's left up to the district to kind of figure out, and usually local voters will approve some of those initiatives. So going out 3 years, it gets a little more murky moving out. Into 3 years, it's sort of like looking at your family budget. It's real clear currently, and then as you go out further in time, there's going to be some definite triggers and some dominoes that will happen. But that's why you see a lot of these things are repeated. And then I wanted to round out with Superintendent Goals, and then we'll take some questions. First, I want to remind the board meeting, the board, that we had a July 11th board meeting. The Superintendent Goals are aligned to focus on our strategic plan. All of our employee goals will fall under the umbrella of our strategic plan, and it's also aligned with the superintendent's contract. The goals are either quantifiable, the majority of them, or they're evidence-based, meaning evidence can be produced to show the progress on the goals. This last board meeting on July 11th, you saw me getting my carpal tunnel on as I was taking lots of notes from the input from each one of the board members. These goals can be adjusted year to year. Each one of the goals is weighted at 20%. There's 5 priorities. And did some work looking at Scottsdale, Paradise Valley, and Deer Valley. I know Deer Valley was brought up a few times. So the goals have a very similar format to the Deer Valley Unified School District. Underneath all of these goals, there's going to be various strategies in place. Some of the goals is establishing benchmark data on some new surveys. We've talked a lot about a parent survey. We did do a survey last year for the strategic plan, but we'd like to have a yearly parent survey on all things Cave Creek. So we can measure that year to year on how we're doing, from child nutrition to uniforms to busing to academics to school times, all things kind of Cave Creek unified. But again, ultimately my job here as the superintendent is focused on students. So hopefully you'll see in these goals the idea of improving our teaching and learning and the conditions around those so that we can get the biggest bang for our buck for our students. And usually that has to do with our teachers. So going through a few of these slides, the board has seen some of these goals, but you'll notice that the format is similar to Deer Valley. By the end of the school year, Cave Creek will meet 3 or more of the indicators. You'll notice that 11th grade ACT is on there, our 8th grade math scores, which we've talked about quite a bit, our high school graduation rate, the number of industry certifications we have coming out of our CTE programs at the high school to improve that so students can be ready to graduate and get a career right out of high school with that certificate. Our 3rd grade scores, we know our 3rd grade reading is a pivotal juncture. There's even laws around what happens in 3rd grade with regards to their reading scores. And then our 2nd grade, as 2nd grade leads up into 3rd grade, our oral reading fluency scores from our 2nd graders as measured by our DIBELS assessment. On each one of these slides, you'll see kind of the key measures, the evidence examples down below. So that would be focused on student success, which priority number 1 is really priority number 1 for our whole school district because it's our kids. Number 2 is employee excellence. So you'll see Cave Creek will meet 3 or more of the indicators. Increase our employee retention rate. We have data from last year through our iVisions data. We need to have the ability to retain more teachers. Hopefully we can raise salaries so that we're not losing teachers. We'd like to develop a new employee stay survey to solicit feedback from our employee groups that includes school communication, district communication, with an average of 80% response rate from our employees. That might seem like an interesting goal, but employees don't want to fill out surveys. They get to be really busy. We all get surveys and we don't want to fill them out, but we feel like the 80% number is reachable. It's a little bit of a reach. It's doable, but then we could get good data back from our employees. We're unveiling a new teacher and leader evaluation system. We prepared for it last year. This is the first year that we're all learning through that together through the effectiveness project. Also, you'll notice our mentorship program. We have a pre and post survey we're going to do to our mentees. This has come up various times with our school board is how can we lose people after 1 year, 2 years, 3 years? We're trying to crack the code and see through their feedback how can we better support our new teachers. And then our professional learning communities. I know we'll be having our first early release Wednesday with our PLCs this week to be able to assess how effective are those? Are teachers feeling supported? Are they feeling like they can be better teachers because of them? Are they feeling like they have more tools in their quivers, if you will? And that'll be assessed also through some staff feedback, survey feedback. Number 3 is our safe environment or culture. School safety, whether it's emotional or physical, is a priority for us. So we know on our last survey to 6th to 12th graders, there was 47% that clicked, I feel safe at school. We can at least get that up to 50%, I would think. So that would be our goal, and that's from our secondary students, 6 through 12. And then you can see our 3rd to 5th grade students. Now, this is a survey from the students. That's a measure we would like to be able to increase. They took these surveys on the computer last year with various other items. However, the I Feel Safe at School is a very strong indicator. I believe it's strongly agree, strongly disagree. We'd like to better support our counselors and social workers. This has come up with our board. So this year we have a professional development calendar for early releases, and we'll be soliciting their feedback to our counselors. They have big caseloads. Our social workers, we only have 2 in the whole district. How are we supporting them so they can be successful in their jobs? Mr. Dawes, all I know, is organizing around what we call multi-variable security drills. So not just your typical lockdown drill, not just your typical fire drill, but what happens if you go outside your classroom and you can't get out on the left? What's the next option that you do? What if there's a violent person outside the playground doors? Where would you execute that fire drill and go with your students? So we want to introduce some more variables to help our staff understand and empower them to make decisions to keep our kids safe. And at the secondary level, to help our kids feel empowered to make decisions for themselves to stay safe. And then this year, the board will be saying, I think we're calling it the Parent University, a series of courses that we're going to start offering to our parents that include emotional awareness, social emotional learning, behavioral, academic, that we can help our parents understand how they can support their own kids a little better. Under priority number 4, effective operations, resources, and systems. This one's a little more challenging. Like Member Busby brought up the last meeting, within the superintendency, what is my sphere of influence? How much do I really control as I work through people and I work within the school district? The school facility board projects, sometimes those things are out of my control. However, we're going to work really hard to make sure that we get more funding through the school facilities board. People have asked, hey, Dr. Murnau, you promised that a bond would pass. I wish I had that power. I wish I did. I wish I could say a promise and something would happen, but what I promise to do is work really hard so that the darn thing tries to pass, and to work really hard to educate our voters. So some of the feedback we've had from our parents through strategic planning was we can have a better website experience for our parents to communicate, whether it's on an app, whether it's the website. Can we increase the amount of marketing videos that we are putting out there as we're trying to capture our students? And then developing a 3-year technology plan that includes whether there's a bond in the future or where funding is going to come from. And if we don't get funding from the government, how do we lobby our community partners so that we stay up to date in 2022? And lastly, our community partnerships. We certainly get a lot out of this goal. We're very blessed to live in such a giving community. How do we continue to help our community understand our needs? Well, one is we need to continue to educate them and offer school finance courses that I know we started the middle of last year with Mrs. Rodriguez. For all things school finance, it's not an exact science. There's a lot of gray areas. There's a lot of do's and don'ts that your hand can get slapped for. So we want to continue to educate the community, because although we live in a great community, we have some serious financial challenges. We'd like to increase our attendance at the business partner breakfast. We'd like to, the reason that's important is then we can have more partners who specifically would like to support and help our school district. It's not always writing a check. Many times it's partnering through time, through efforts to better the education for our kids. We'd like to continue to increase our tax credit revenues from this school year to the past school year. This is the best kept secret in Arizona, I tell people, and we need to do a better job of helping our families understand, and even those who don't have kids in the district, how a tax credit, you're really not losing anything when you get your taxes back. And finally, I know this was really important to the board. We talked about kind of our staff survey, but making sure we have a really good and solid parent satisfaction survey in place that addresses safety, addresses communication from the school, communication from the district office, all things CCUSD, as I mentioned before, so that we can have a better experience for our parents. So this is the work that's been brought back to the board. This is on the agenda later for the board to be able to approve. As I mentioned before, I tried to take all the board's feedback and be as concise as I could, and making sure that these goals reflected the board's direction and the direction of the strategic plan.
So let's start with the first goal. Does anybody want to does anyone have comments, questions regarding that first goal?
I wanted to just address the fact that we are looking at some key areas that were shown to be areas that we wanted to work on, for the 11th grade students, for their ELA, and the 8th grade students for their math. And I did forget to mention this when we were talking about pulling out some of the things I was going to mention, that there was a strategic hire in this area to get somebody, an amazingly good teacher back here that had been here before, to specifically address this 8th grade math goal here. Amy Macbeth is someone I worked with before. She's been hired back to do just this, and I think this is a huge thing for this district, and it's a good thing that will help this goal be done. The rest of these goals are good, and they're, I like how they're either quantifiable or evidence-based. So we took what Dr. Monroe took what we were talking about before and put it into some good practice here. So that's just what I had to say about that one.
I have several kind of comments. The next to the last bullet point, third grade reading scores. I may have said something like this at the last meeting. The thing that bothers me about that, having taught third grade for a long time, is that there's no accountability in second. And they do have the dibbles, but what I mean by that is there is no standardized test. And so they come up to third grade, and that's a high stakes year. So that does concern me. And hopefully there will be, I don't want to say pressure put on second, accountability. The other thing, the oral reading fluency. Fluency doesn't measure comprehension. I understand that fluency is important to comprehension. I get that. But, you know, I had kids that could read so quickly, didn't understand a thing they were reading. So that's a concern to me, that oral reading fluency is, you know, an indicator, and that doesn't necessarily measure comprehension. If it's me, I want the kid to comprehend what they read, really. I don't care how fast they read. So those are two comments on the bullet points.
Member Hatcher, excuse me, on the fluency, obviously, we want the comprehension piece. Is there, in third grade, is there a test or is there a benchmark or something that we have used in the past to measure that?
Do you guys do something now?
Yeah, Dr. Jensen?
For comprehension?
Yes, both good comments. So you're correct, President Hatcher, in that the reading fluency is just one indicator of a child's ability to read. However, it's an important one, and now the reading fluency is actually tested on the AASA in third grade as well. So not only do they have to pass the reading test where they have to infer and read for context clues and show their critical thinking on the reading test, but then they also have to go to a room and read a passage 2 different times, or 2 different passages, and sound fluent as well. That was piloted this last year, and I believe, I haven't heard otherwise, but I believe that's going into effect this year. So that was one of the reasons why we looked at that measure. On another note, there is a second grade, their PLC last year, they did do an end-of-year second grade assessment, and so that was exciting. They're revising it, and they made it way too long, and so they're revising it, and we're cutting it down a bit, but they're even going to have at least semesterly, possibly quarterly mini assessments, so that it's maybe, you know, taking up 40 minutes, not half a day like the AASA can tend to do. So we are building in some accountability structures there. And then with the third grade one, I mean, yes, that is always going to be a problem. The 2%, that's why we tried to look at some trend data and came up with the best measurable thing we could. I mean, we're hoping for it's way beyond 2%, and I hope a teacher doesn't look at that and say, oh, I only need to increase my scores by 2% this year, because we need all of the teachers to increase by more than 2% in order for it to appear that way.
So when you put these kinds of things as goals, and I really as an educator hate talking in these terms, I really do. But when you put them as goals for you, then the teachers are going to have similar goals because you're not in there teaching their classes. So you're so far up the food chain from the kids that principals should have similar goals. It should flow up, and you did mention that, and so, and I know you know that. I'm making this comment that if these were my goals, I'd want to make darn sure that the people who are actually teaching the kids understand that goal. You know what I mean? How many teachers, and I don't really want a number, but approximately, how many teachers that we hired this year are brand new? Do we have any sense of that? Taught before.
Dr. Hendrickson, so brand new to the profession. We had, 60 to 70 at new teacher orientation. How many do you think were brand new to the profession?
I'll get back to you guys with an exact number, but I want to say maybe 15 to 20 of those were brand new. A lot of veteran teachers that we got back, teachers returning from another district back to Cave Creek, but I'll get you the exact number of brand new.
15 to 20, and that's K through 12?
Yes, K through 12.
Okay, because again, if these were my goals, I would want to know that. I would want to know if there are 10 new teachers in third grade who have never taught third grade, and this is one of my goals, I'd want to make sure they know what I'm doing.
No, it's great input. And those, again, it goes without saying, a student is not a test score. I have kids. Many of us in this room have kids. There's so much more than that. However, a test score is an indicator of how they're doing. But there's variables like, do they have a new teacher? Did they have breakfast that morning? Did they sleep well? There's so many variables that can throw those off. And so, as I mentioned before, the sphere of influence for the superintendent is maybe limited in some aspects. However, I have a lot of faith in the structures we put in, some of the training that we're giving teachers, and I certainly wouldn't offer a goal that I didn't think was doable. Some of them are very far reach and rigorous than others. But I appreciate the input, and I appreciate acknowledging, because there's a lot of variables that are out of our control.
Another thing, the AASA, I believe it's called a crosswalk or the blueprint. You guys know what I'm talking about. Are teachers given that, or because again, new teachers may not even be aware of it. Experienced teachers, I don't know if they use it or not. I always used it. It's a valuable tool.
That is a great question, President Hatcher. I'll actually let Patty, because I know she was just talking to me about this, so go ahead.
Yes,
Dr.
excellent
Jensen.
question, President Hatcher. So we do share it with all the teachers in due time and in a digestible manner, because it can be a little bit overwhelming to look at. However, I don't know if you remember last year we gave all of our students what we called the AASA Mimic test in March, end of February, early March, and that was based off of the same blueprint. So if there were 20% of the questions that were on vocabulary, then 20% of the questions were on vocabulary. So we build that in throughout the year and draw attention to it. And we try to do that in a way that doesn't overwhelm anyone, because yes, for someone who's taught for 5 years and beyond, they're ready for that, and they want to hear that, and they kind of thrive off of that type of analytical information. For a brand new person, they're kind of more of, tell me what to teach tomorrow, and then next week. And so we try to tier it out.
Okay, all right.
May I just ask a follow-up then to that? As we work our schedule, we know when the tests will be in the spring. There's a timeline in working backwards with our early release, our PLC events. So our second grade teachers that did these mini benchmarks from a year ago, then they can communicate with the third grade teachers. That's probably sooner than the testing, but you're able then to use those PLC events to kind of get everybody on the same page as we're ramping up toward assessment week.
Yes, Member Brown, I think I know what you're saying. So that second grade test that they gave at the end of the year, third grade can see that in School City, and they can go in and look and see how their students did on the end of second grade test, and then base this year off of that.
And then I would assume then there'll be then the discussion going back down from third grade teachers back down to the second grade group to say, oh, we missed this piece. Can you do a little different teaching next year? So.
Absolutely. We try to give appropriate forums for that so it doesn't all happen in the parking lot because it could get violent. But yes, those are definitely good conversations that we have. And in fact, if you remember last year, we even had from 7th to 6th grade. And I know Mrs. Sereno and all of the principals, we worked very hard to make sure that those weren't going to be finger-pointing sessions, but instead, hey, let's talk about some of the strengths that our students are coming to us with and where we need to improve. So, yes.
Good, thank you. I would say that eighth grade rolling into freshman algebra too, I'm sure is a hot topic. Miss Scott's favorite math topics.
And one more thing regarding metrics, and this is just a comment.
Sure.
Is that I get that education, they want to see test scores. I understand that. But again, there's so much more that goes into the education of students, and if we're super focused on metrics, you might not pay attention to problem solving, creativity, critical thinking, communication, skills that are valuable when the kids get out of here and they get out of college. Not everything we do is money. Well, Freudian slip. You have to make obviously you have to earn money, but you still have to have these soft skills. And so if we become obsessed with metrics, we just want to make sure that we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. I'm finished. That was rather long. Anybody else? No one else on one? You?
Mrs. Scott, do you want to talk about industry certifications and how that relates to EVIT?
Absolutely. President Hatcher, members of the board, Ms. Walker, specifically with this one is on our satellite campuses, so our current programs that we have on our Cactus Shadows High School. So we want to increase their industry certifications. EVIT, all of the programs there give that industry cert at the end of the first year because they're block program. We give ours at the end of the second year. So as soon as a student, for example, let's say they take Finance 1 as a sophomore, Finance 2 as a junior, that Finance 2, we will give them that industry certification exam. So this specific one is increasing the numbers of the students for our satellite campuses.
Overall, the intent of these goals, I think, is good. Where I struggle a little bit, like for the first one, by the end of the 2023 school year, 11th grade students will demonstrate academic gains. Well, if we're having goals, like you could increase by 0.01% or you can increase by 20%. And if these are goals that are linked to a performance pay, which they are, there's a huge difference between 0.01% and 20%. And, an increase, the way this is written, an increase is an increase. I would like to see this a little more defined. And then back to the CTE, we will increase the number of the industry certifications. Do we have a number or a percent for that? Or is this just we have one more than last year, so we have an increase. Some of these goals in here just seem a little too vague, especially since they are connected to a performance pay. It's supposed to be a yardstick for how we've done. And we need to be able to demonstrate more specifically and concisely how we've really grown instead of just saying, well, we have more than last year. That's it from that one.
And I think this is a philosophical thing, too, is as I look at some of the other districts, we just go to student experience. I'll just read a couple of them. Enhanced student readiness. Provide authentic learning experiences. Let's see if we can get one that's more having to do with student achievement. I'm looking for student achievement. Really don't see it. It's student experience. The descriptors are vague, and that's my point. They're vague. Develop transparent, prioritize resources. It's vague. And my concern, I already expressed my concern in terms of metrics and overdoing metrics. But the other thought I have is that if most of the competition around us have worded their goals similar to this or vague, a couple of these are downright vague, then I personally don't want to appear that we are being punitive or setting another standard that's not competitive. I would hate to make it such that future candidates wouldn't want to be here. I wouldn't do that to teachers. I'd want our teachers to have reasonable evaluations and goals similar to the competition. And I personally wouldn't want to do it to a superintendent. So it gets into a philosophical thing here too.
I do think that just having that evidence, we can make our judgments based on what has presented to us at that time, saying, well, yeah, it was increased a little bit, but it was only increased by that much, so maybe that would weigh into the performance. But having everything to have a number would probably be, like President Hatcher said, a little bit deterring to some people, that they have to look at it and say, every single goal that I have here has got a specific number on it. And then you get into that whole thing about what she said about the sphere of influence that the superintendent has and how that projects. So if we're communicating that we want to have these increases and that is being pushed forward to all the staff and all the schools, then we can say, yep, we are making increases, and then we can make our judgments based on that. So I don't think every single goal needs to have a specific number on it, but as Dr. Monroe said, evidence that there is progress being made should definitely work for a lot of these goals.
And we also, as a board, see that mid-year, in December, we get like the mid-year review and update, and that's directly presented against the goals. So, it's not like these all go away and we don't see them until next May. So we do have some, and obviously through the course of board meetings too, if something that's listed as a goal that we see come up, through agenda items or something, and then that might also factor into that December recap when we get to mid-year. So it's kind of a work in progress. And what we decide tonight or don't decide tonight, whether that carries over, if we want to reword them, if we want to go a different direction, again, it's a living document, and we'll see how good we are come December, or if we're way out of line and really need to readdress what direction we're going. Obviously, we want to all go in a positive direction for the students and the staff and for the district, but like Dr. Monroe says, we don't have the crystal ball. We're just trying our best with what we've got. So
yeah, so that's a good point. Because ultimately this will occur in June based on hard scores. And the language is substantial progress, and the board will have to determine what substantial progress is. So I would think that one student improvement would not be substantial progress, But mid-year, you'll be gauging things, as will principals and teachers, because they're going to have similar goals, right? To improve. I mean, the 11th grade teachers will know that they're being charged with raising ELA composite scores, similarly reading, writing. Yeah.
Where I'm missing something in here, obviously. Where does it say substantial growth?
That's the language in the,
Because I'm looking at what's here.
it's the language in the pay for performance.
Okay, yeah.
It's also reflected in the contract as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Should they be
And the
consistent?
resolution.
Because we have demonstrate academic gains, and then another document says substantial. So there's a lack of consistency in, I mean.
Well,
I think
substantial-
that's for the whole
I'm just
document.
asking,
Yeah.
does it need to be consistent? Because if you have a contract that says substantial, yet your stated goal here is just, you got to increase in academic gains.
I think that's for everything, though, and actually, the priorities are more concise and written out than just the resolution.
But
It's more vague.
My point is, if these are the goals, should they be consistent with how the contract is written or the resolution?
Well, it's progress towards the goal, where some of these are written of actually like meeting a goal. Like these numbers, you'd have to meet that goal of 3%. So it's actually less on the resolution.
Yeah,
I see what Member Busby's saying, though, because we've got the living document of the superintendent contract. And should we carry that verbiage over to the superintendent goals so that both documents read the same is how I'm.
Because right now, they're not reading the same.
Okay, that's
And
what-
you have to interpret one to fit into the other document or vice versa. And that doesn't seem like that's very cohesive. I'm just saying.
I don't see a problem with how it's written, because this is saying you're demonstrating academic goals. Again, when it comes time, when you have that contract and the pay for performance next to this document, and the goal is academic gains, and the criteria is, was there substantial progress towards academic gains? That would be, you would be able to, tell if, as I said a minute ago, for example, if only 5 kids demonstrated academic gains, that's clearly not substantial progress toward academic gains in ELA scores. To me, they're not exactly the same thing. One is progress
And one specific
towards the
goals.
goal. The goal being demonstrating academic gains. And it's subjective.
What would you like it to read?
Well, personally, I think there should be consistency in the verbiage. I mean, this
Yeah.
document is titled 2022-23 Superintendent Goals.
Right.
Not steps to the goals, but these are what's being presented as the goals. So if these are the goals, then what's written in the contract, that type of language should be reflective of how these goals are written, so that there's consistency and there's no question, no confusion, no, oh gee, I didn't understand how that was written.
So you want to switch the resolution verbiage?
Either switch the resolution verbiage or switch this, one or the other, because they're written 2 different ways.
To me, the resolution's written more like a summary, and then the goals are very specific. Just don't know how you change that.
Well, I'm still not seeing a problem with it, because if the aim is to insert substantial academic gains, if that's really where this is going, then that's a goal. And substantial progress is not the same thing as substantial academic gains. Substantial progress is measuring the gain or the lack thereof. In my mind, these are two different things.
I really don't see a conflict with them. I think they're both, the wording is different, but they're both saying the same thing. We need to see growth in these areas. How are you presenting to the board, as Member Brown said, on these frequent basis? How are you presenting to the board that things are moving in the right direction? And then when it comes time for doing the evaluations, we have, here's the gains. Was it substantial? Not really. Then we don't do that. Or yes, it was substantial.
How is substantial defined?
No, that would have to be something that we would have to discuss as a board. Would this be considered substantial? Well, it's this percent. Yeah, I'd say that was pretty substantial. Or no, it wouldn't. And then that would be something we'd have to hash out. But I think that having every single thing to have a number on it would be, I do IEP goals, and sometimes you have to have some numbers, and sometimes you have to have things that are, as President Hatcher says, kind of soft goals that you're showing improvement on it. So I think that you want to try and balance some of this out so that we're presenting a decent document for here going forward. So I don't want to get caught up in all sorts of numbers and verbiage. The goals themselves seem to be well written, and things that we talked about last time, some of them have some indicators and some of them are making progress. So he would have to present evidence that it was done if he wanted to get his performance. Does that make sense?
Yeah, they're totally two
As a
separate for me.
whole, in this document, there's several things that are like steps to achieve the goal. Like in number 2, there's at least 3 different bullet points there that are things to do, but it's not necessarily what I would consider a good goal. It's a step on how to achieve employee excellence. Not, if
But rolling out, like for number 2, rolling out and implementing a teacher evaluation, that's a goal.
okay, that's a goal. So, okay, you implement something, you roll it out. So, okay, you satisfied that, so great.
Good, it's
How do we measure, how do we demonstrate to this district that we have increased our presence, our product that we're producing? If we can't have something truly tangible to present to this community and say, and justify, this is why we're paying a performance bonus of whatever amount of money to this superintendent. Oh, well, we rolled out a survey, and that's why we're going to justify performance pay. And that might sound sort of trite, but take a step back. There's a lot of people in this community who are voters that are not connected directly to the school district with children in the district. So those people are voters. Those are the people who vote either for or against any of our bond initiatives. How do we demonstrate to that segment of our community that we've done our homework and we are truly developing goals that will move this district forward in a quantifiable way, instead of, well, we're going to increase academic gains?
Well, I
Okay,
think that's
why
why
are
they're-
we afraid to put a number to it?
I think that's why there's 5 different bullet points, and
But
he's going to
these-
meet a bunch of those. And if he doesn't, then he hasn't shown the employee excellence that needs to be shown. And so therefore, he would not get performance pay on that. So altogether, it is a big goal with those different components. There's a goal, and then there's the objectives underneath it. So altogether, that's showing these are the 5 steps that we are expecting to take sorry, and he has to meet, 3 or more have to be met. And if he hasn't done it, then he hasn't done it, and we have to hold them accountable for that. So that whole big thing with all those components are what we are saying justifies employee excellence towards that goal, period. That's what it does. I mean, to have, again, having every single thing have a number dilutes it to the point where it's like, oh, well, yeah, it was, we're getting way into the weeds instead of saying, how are we making progress here? Are we seeing that more people are happy than they were last time? Yeah, we're moving in the right direction. That means we're hitting employee excellence. Doesn't have to have a number. It's like, yeah, but it's increasing. It's going in the way that we want.
And now we have at least a fifth of these 5 goals that performance pay is broken out into 5 different parts. 20% is linked to each one of these priorities. Maybe, I think this is very specific, and I don't know what else to discuss unless you have specific things you want to enter under every priority that you would like us to add.
I think this is a philosophical difference for one thing, and so that's part of the issue here is we're not necessarily in agreement philosophically as to tying numbers to everything. I really and truly, and I've said this before too, I'm more about showing growth than definitely tying a superintendent to numbers. For my kids and for students, I would want to see a year's growth minimum. And that's what I would want to see. That to me is a better indicator than me pulling up a test score and seeing a number. So I would not want a number. I don't even know how you would go about doing that.
Well, there are some things, and as a teacher, some of the things that I've been, looked at is, how are the students in my classroom? How are they behaving? How are they working with each other? Some of those things you can't put a number on, but when the people come in and they observe you, they are writing those down, they're taking notes, and you can see that in January, X number of kids were working together, they were playing together, they were doing that, but then there's some more kids that were doing it next time, but overall things were a little bit better. So sometimes there's numbers, sometimes it's just an overall view of what's happening in the classroom. I think that's kind of the same thing here, where sometimes you're going to have overall numbers and sometimes you're just going to have an overall view of what's happening in the district. Not everything can be measured. Sometimes it has to be observed, sometimes it has to be shown when you're making your presentation to the person that's evaluating you. This is what's happening, this is how it was at the beginning of the year, this is how it is now. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, there are 4
of these that have specific goals on all 3 surrounding districts. Some goals have an exact number and some just say reduce the gap between general education students for ELA and math at half of our schools. So none of them are percentage, are very vague, statistically significant growth. That's all it says on some of these.
Can I ask
There's
a
no
question?
number on any of them.
I appreciate what other school districts are doing, and kudos to whatever any one of these districts are doing. I'm concerned about Cave Creek and what we're doing for our district. What they do for their superintendent is what they're doing. If our superintendent has an issue, then he needs to speak up. you know, we keep bringing up, oh, well, this is what the other districts are doing. We have no say in what Scottsdale, PV, Deer Valley, we don't have any say in what those districts are doing. So why does that become a factor now? Because this is specific to our district, to our employee, to what's going on and how we're moving this district forward.
It's a factor to me for two reasons, because in the last meeting, Janet, you gave us a really comprehensive DV.
That was
thing.
that was an example, because what our goals up to this point historically have been extremely non-comprehensive. And I brought that as an example to show, could we put some more meat into what we're presenting as a goal? It wasn't, here, this is what they're doing, and we need to do that. It was a visual aid to demonstrate my point as we need to be more comprehensive.
But that is one reason why I looked at other competitors, because we were given that. The second thing was, I already stated it, I do not think it's very wise to box ourselves in, and you have to pay attention to the industry. That's why we've lost teachers. We have to pay attention to the industry. And if the competitors around us if they have a DV document, all the competitors, that's one thing, but they don't. And so we're a high-performing district. You know, I realize on social media some folks are acting like the sky is falling, which is an insult to our teachers and staff. We are a highly performing district. This should not be a punitive document, and it's beginning to feel punitive to me. You know, the first bullet point, there are 4 percentages to measure the goals by. There are only, 2 that aren't. And so maybe there are 5 that have percentages attached to them. No, 4. That seems fair to me. 4 with numbers. This is a heck of a lot tighter than it was before.
Yeah, I didn't see what your goals had been in the past for other superintendents, but this seems to be very detailed compared to what, since I've been on the board, what we've had.
So as not to get stuck on this one, either we're going to need to agree to disagree, or pass on this one, or the majority of us rewrite goals.
I think the same arguments are going to be able to be applied to the next 4 goals. Some of them have numbers, some of them don't. Some of the things need to be shown and be discussed and presented when the employee goes to the evaluator and says, here's what's happening in my classroom or my district, and then it's up to the evaluator to say, yeah, I've seen that. This is good evidence of it. Kids were running around like maniacs at the beginning of the year. They're sitting in their seats and they're working now. There's improvement. And it may not be all quantifiable, but you can see it when you walk in. It can be addressed and it can be discussed, and then there can be something that's put towards the evaluation. So, I mean, that's what it's going to be for every single one of these things. So, I mean, we could be here until midnight talking about each one of these things, but that's basically the gist of what we're seeing here. And these goals represent what we want to see. Some things are numbers, some things are progress. But together, all these bullet points create a goal that Dr. Monroe would be responsible for. And then we would be having to say yep or no. So, yeah, maybe it's philosophical. Maybe it's the difference of being in the classroom and being not. But I don't know. But I think we're okay.
And I think Member Brown did a good job saying this is kind of like a working document. We get updates on it throughout the year, and then we have to go into executive session and discuss them all individually and get that information as well.
And I know the July 11th meeting was hard. Member Walker was gone on the phone. I was gone, was on the phone. I mean, if you look back at our meeting minutes that we'll approve in the action consent, there's 7 pages of just the superintendent goals and discussion. So the other 3 board members here had a much better discussion about it. When I know it was tough, I was catching most of it on the phone. And I read through the minutes several times because there was tons of good comments made by all the board members, even Member Walker and myself, even being on the phone, we were able to chime in every once in a while with a good point. It's tough. It's all 5 of us want the district to do the best that the district can do, and I think we are all passionate about that. And we may, like Member Fortney said, maybe we would just need to agree to disagree, or Member Hatcher, whoever just said that. I have to be careful because in my career was all number generated, so I was held to numbers across the board. My understanding, we're dealing with students pre-K to 12, we're dealing with staff. Yes, you can't assign a number to everything, and I think Member Fortney said it the right way. I think we're just some things we can put a number on, but there's also going to be some items that we may need to just be a little more philosophical about and go that direction. These are, of the years of attending board meetings and seeing other past years of superintendent's goals, these are much more in-depth than what we had seen with prior administrations. Excuse me. So I do think we are maybe going in the right direction, and I think on the minutes, Dr. Jensen or somebody, there was a mention, they showed a slide at that July 11th meeting, and the superintendent goals, there's like it rains down through the principals, through the staff, through the teachers. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't get the visuals on the phone, I'm sorry. But I know Member Hatcher said, obviously we want to communicate that down to everybody, so we're all rowing in the right direction. Mm-hmm. And that's also very important. We want the new teachers, along with the experienced teachers, realizing that the board's holding the superintendent accountable to the best of our ability. Where we can assign a number to it, we'll do it. Where it's more of an observation or a philosophical observation, then that also figures in. And maybe shame on us as a board, maybe we need to look at how we worded the superintendent contract and now need to circle back with the next year's goals, and maybe we'll see, maybe we do need to align them a little closer. I don't know if that's ever been done in the past. I would speculate to say it's probably, this Cave Creek board's probably never done that, which would be maybe interesting to go back now and look at the contract and say, okay, now we see where those 5 goals slot in at through the contract, and maybe that would help us as a board write better contracts in the future too. So we learn a little something on our end.
So I'm hearing that the 5 of us aren't going to agree, but it sounds like we need to move on, because ultimately the board still is in control in June. So that's the bottom line,
Well, we'll bring, like I said, we'll see this in December. I mean, we'll see the mid-year.
Yeah.
And I think that will also help us for the next year's set of goals too, to say, oh, we were way short here, and oh my gosh, we really knocked it out of the park. Now we know where we can improve or write better goals for us.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so goal two. Did you want to say something? Oh, I thought I heard it. All right. Comments on this one? Dr. Monroe, I have a question for you on your 4th bullet point, sorry. You talk about a pre and a post for the mentorship feedback. Would you consider a mid-year also? Because otherwise, by the end of the year, you can't improve. Or, I know you're not in there mentoring, but.
Yes, would consider a mid-year, certainly.
And then, curiosity question, is anything specific being done to support immersion teachers?
Dr. Jensen, do you want to speak to that one? The answer is yes. So.
Yes, President Hatcher, members of the board. So our immersion teachers, they have a couple of different ways that they receive help. One, through our Director of Academic Programs, Stacy Weiss. She supports them. She is one person, and that is a lot. We do also this year have 2 instructional coaches funded through title grants. And so Christine Hughley, who's here, and Luke Ackerson, they also are supporting. And one piece that we do have that is often overlooked is there's this great website because that we have set up and that Stacy runs for the immersion teachers, and it has little things as small as where can you go if you feel like you're getting sick in the middle of the and it's a doctor or whatever it may be. So it's a lot of those living in America types of situations because many of our immersion teachers are from abroad. So we have that website. Stacy supports them, and then Christine and Luke support them as well. And they're all assigned a mentor teacher on their campus as well. And we have, I don't remember the ratio for sure, but I believe it's 1 to 3. Each mentor teacher takes on 3, and they receive a stipend for mentoring them on the campus.
There's a lot of things that also aren't measured. For example, Mrs. Barella and her husband, just yesterday, getting furniture and helping our teacher, Spanish teacher at the high school, be able to move into their place. And so wonderful efforts like that, so our principals and teachers go the extra mile to support them.
And during this mentorship, are they given a cultural mentoring? Because I know, the folks I work with, it was shell shock over when they came over here. Different kind of parents than they're used to, different classroom management. I mean,
yes,
completely different.
President Hatcher. So that's what part of the website does, and I can share that in an upcoming board update, just so that everyone can see what that website has on it. And it's it has some little cultural norms like that about maybe how to command respect in an American classroom, because that's different than in other cultures as well. So just lots of little tidbits like that.
There we go. We met with Amity, which is one of our visa sponsors, last week, and they kind of shared with us what they do on their end for those things, not the school-related things, but how do they get them acclimated, how do they get them supports, and they have a coordinator that is constantly in touch with them to support their emotional needs and things like that as they enter the country. So they have that level of support from them.
Thank you. And I feel like I've taken it off track a bit because I specifically asked for immersion, and you don't specifically state immersion. So built into your goal, you're probably including immersion, right?
Of course, yeah. If they're considered new staff that are assigned mentors, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
To go with what President Hatcher said about the mentor-mentee feedback, I think that, again, to get some mid-year thing for the staff, and yeah, I know sometimes it's not all that fun to fill out all these staff things, but I think that a pre and post staff survey should have something maybe mid-year too, so you can look at it and say, we're a little bit short in these areas, we need to address this, or we're doing really good here, keep doing what we're doing. So I was going to say the same thing for that staff survey.
On the new teacher and leader evaluation system that came through the effectiveness project, you've already had some training with your administrators who's going to start looking at that. Did you get any feedback, positive, negative? Was it too much? Because those both of those documents were rather large, and it was quite a bit, from what we have done in the past. So I don't know. I mean, this year is going to be kind of we'll see. We'll work the bugs out of the program issue, but I just curious. I mean, since it's listed as a goal, where did that fall in at for feedback?
President Hatcher, members of the board, Member Brown, specifically with that one, we had the teacher design team that also included 2 teachers from each of the staff to help assist any teacher that's on campus that had some additional questions regarding that evaluation tool. And then also within our own staff, for example, I just received an email today from one of our schools that the principal and the assistant principal were walking through classrooms and discussing that inter-rater reliability so that they have that amongst the administration together. And then also on top of that, within our principal meetings, we're incorporating inter-rater reliability, so we have that additional training for the staff also.
Okay, I know Member Hatcher was concerned seeing a new evaluation system coming down for the teachers, and I know we wouldn't just spring it on them in March, here you go, but again, a work in progress as we develop a new program for that. So I'm
Absolutely.
just curious to see feedback as it, good, bad, or otherwise from the staff and the administrators that will need to go through all those.
And then right now, as of last week, every staff member received that evaluation training through the teacher design team with the principals on the campuses.
Good. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Anyone else? Okay, goal 3, safe environment.
Just wanted to comment that I'm glad to see the support for the school counselors and social workers. What they're going through right now is very critical, and to find out how we can support them and then support them is very critical. So that'll be good information to see.
And I have a question on the student surveys, the feeling safe at school. Are they talking emotionally, physically, both? What?
President Hatcher, that item number, Mr. Dolezal knows this a little better than I do, but there's a series of 25, maybe 25 statements that the students rate. And that specific statement on the first 2 bullets simply reads those 5 words, I feel safe at school. So that allows us, do they not feel physically safe, emotionally safe, or, do they feel like they're being bullied? So that specific item is just, I feel safe at school. There's other items on that survey that get at different specific things. But as far as overall safety, we just wanted to see if someone was to say, do you feel safe at school? What would that student's response be? Yeah, I feel safe at school, and people look after me. So those items, it's just those 5 words for those 2.
Do they have an opportunity to answer open-ended responses? For example, if I saw a survey and kids were saying they didn't feel safe, I would want to know why. And so is there an open-ended, if you say no, tell me why, kind of a thing?
Yeah, President Hatcher, I'll look to Mr. Dolezal. You want to step up to the mic? Mr. Dolezal is kind of our resident expert with student services, him and Mrs. Scott, but he can probably do a better job answering this.
Good afternoon. It's afternoon in Hawaii, so we'll go with that. So the President Hatcher, members of the board and cabinet. So there is not a specific question open-ended that follows right after that, is please tell us if you said no, please explain why. There are open-ended questions, both along the lines of what do we need to improve, or if there's other things, and Dr. Monroe's hit the nail on the head, there are some questions that are more specific than I just feel, I feel safe at school. Is that one? But then there are ones about feeling bullied, seeing friends, emotional safety. So there are some more specific things that are in there afterwards. And there are open-ended questions, but there's not one right after that particular question to say, if you said no, please tell us why.
Thank you. And is that true with 3rd through 5th too? They have the opportunity to respond like
yes,
that?
President Hatcher, there is, both surveys have, and one of the best things that I used to ask and what I think we can ask is, if you could change anything or make something better at school, what would it be? And those, that gleans, you get a lot from
Yeah.
the responses to that, whether they're talking about, and then you can pair that back up with, well, this student, answered this way, and now they don't feel safe, and like you can see, okay, here's what they're talking about then, or vice versa, if there was something good, how it goes along with that as well.
Thank you.
Before you go sit down, I have a question, sir. The fourth bullet point, something that's come out of some of the investigation of the issue that happened in Texas was that the school had too many what they considered false alarms, to the point that the staff got complacent. And when the one time they had an active issue, that some of the staff thought, oh, here's another drill again. Understanding there's a fine line between, I'm just kind of making a statement, but understanding there's a fine line between being prepared and then being over-prepared and then having the staff get complacent, because we sure would not want to have an issue like that. So I appreciate the different types of drills, obviously, that's on this bullet point. I just don't want to drill it to the point that, I know, I don't want to go from 0 to 60 and then the staff gets, like I said, gets a little complacent, and then all of a sudden, God forbid, we have an issue. So,
Member Brown, I hear what you're saying. We will definitely stick. I mean, there are federal even regulations in terms of how many evacuation drills, which is now the term for a fire drill. So when you're just evacuating on site, we have to do those monthly. We have to do the first one within the first 10 days of school, and then we have to do for lockdown / shelter in place drills 1 a quarter. So that we have to do that many. Going beyond that, I would say maybe we get into the complacency. The schools that have invited me out, and I've gotten a chance to talk with teachers and the staff and really talk about why. I mean, all of this is fresh in people's minds right now. So I don't think there's that complacency, and they're not going to get overdone at this point. But I hear what you're saying, and I agree. We can do something so much that then, oh, well, this must be another one. But we also have to emphasize that we do all of these as if they're real. And there's that certain aspect for our adults who are in charge of keeping all of our kids safe, and the adults safe. That's a big emphasis of mine. This is not just about student safety. It is about our staff, too, and the parents that may be there in our community that comes and supports us in keeping them safe while they're there.
yeah, I've participated in a lockdown a couple of times while I've been on campus, either at a book fair or in the lunchroom or something like that. And in the past, staff has taken it serious. I'm just, like I said, I just didn't want it, like you said, you hear what I'm saying. I just don't want to go overboard.
I have a question in regards to the same thing. Just seems like a lot of information's coming out about active shooter drills being more traumatizing, but you're saying that they are required by
An active
state?
shooter drill is
Okay.
not required.
Okay.
That's a different.
Do we include social workers as far as at the different campuses? I would think at an elementary school it's probably much different than at the junior high versus high school, for those trauma reasons around that.
Member Walker, so one of the things that we've asked that's been different in the past, and again, going out and getting some best practices, is that all of our teachers now, in their emergency folders, now they happen to be pink forms, but these pink forms, which are reminders for them, and then also if they're not there, for substitutes or another teacher who's taking their class, about students who may need assistance during any type of emergency, whether that's ambulatory assistance, they're on crutches right now,
Right.
whether that's some type of emotional security, they need a stress ball if this thing goes off. Those types of things are all pre-done ahead of time in order to handle some of that stress. We're grateful that we have the social workers that we have now to add to that, and that's something that we would learn. Oftentimes parents may not tell us that their child may react for the very first time.
That's
right,
what I'm thinking.
once they
more
get to
of
middle
once they
school or
hear
something
that.
like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
So in that regard, we do lean on our teachers to notice that, and then get them the help, whether that's the counselors on campus or bringing in a social worker, and then involving that parent in what can we do.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Can I go back up to bullet point 1 and 2 real quick? Are you planning on, are they going to do a mid-year again, or just an end of year?
The student survey we did administer the student survey last year, so that's where we have some of that baseline data. So it's administered to the kids. I think in our meeting we talked about in October. Was it the end of October or after the break? So after a quarter into the year, we wanted to do the assessment. And what will be good on the survey is we can align it exactly with how we did it last year to see, are we increasing, are kids feeling like their day-to-day school life is better? Or if it's lower, why is that? So this would be something year to year where it would be very valuable for a principal, for Mrs. Sereno to put these items next to each other from last year to see how they've increased. To continue, and this is students' perception. So remember, we're measuring people's perception. So, it wouldn't be administered multiple times. This year, it would be once a year, the survey.
All right. So for your goal, you'd be using last year's as your benchmark, and then October to see growth.
Which again, like we talk about, there's so many variables out of your control. There could be a school shooting around the United States a week before the survey is, and students are a lot more sensitive, and so they put, I don't feel safe at school. So to some of the board's points, it's hard to put a lot of numbers on some of these things. It can be challenging. There's a lot of variables that are out of our control. But if all things were to stay the same year to year, I would love to continue to increase that. I would love for it to be 100%, but more than anything, we need to discover what's going on with the other 24% or the other 50% of the kids who say they don't feel safe at school.
Right.
Yeah. Dr. Monroe, on bullet point number 3, and this is just a pie in the sky question. In a perfect world, what would be our staffing model for counselors and social workers at the schools? Because obviously that's going to be something as this generation works through the COVID and many other issues that they've had to deal with, that the students have had to deal with, and staff. Where would we, for our size of a district, what would be our perfect sweet spot?
Yeah, Member Brown, I'm actually going to have Mrs. Scott think about the Aasa model and what do the experts, and you can explain what Aasa is, what is the ratio that they recommend and where we are.
President Hatcher, members of the board, the Aasa model recommends 1 to 250. We would love to have that. But as you know, there's a definite cost to that. I will say, and I was just actually having this conversation today with Aaron, we at the high school level, we are blessed with 5 counselors for our students, and that's brought the average down. I remember when I was a high school principal with 2,000 kids, I had 4 counselors for 2,000 students. And so here we have 5 for our for under 1,800 students. And so at the high school level, we have that piece incorporated. Having the social worker helping us at the middle school also is going to decrease that numbers, because it used to be 2, and hopefully we'll have our second counselor hired soon, but that brings that down to, instead of 1 for 800 kids or 2 for 800 kids, you've got 3 for them. But the Aasa model, the national model, their recommendation would be 1 to 250.
And Governor Ducey has, in his budget, assigned more money to school safety through social workers, police officers, and school counselors. So we'll see what that yields to us. So we're not at the 1 to 250, but we're pretty darn close. And I would put us up against to a lot of the other high schools that maybe are at 1 to 350, 1 to 400, 1 to 500. So maybe we're 1 to 300-ish or 275.
We're about, I think 325 is what we were. 350.
That's what they recommend.
And then at the elementaries, we have a counselor or a social worker at each one?
We have a counselor currently at each of the elementaries. We're still working on one of our elementaries filling that position.
Okay.
And that was a model that we moved when we took into our positions. It was before you had one counselor sharing several campuses, and that's very difficult. It's very difficult to build a relationship with students on your campus when you're here one day, you're not the next. And so having that one counselor at each of the designated elementaries really helps our counselors build the relationships with our students.
Definitely agree with that. Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Anything else on goal 3? Okay, goal 4, operations. On the third bullet point, I have a question. How will you know a marketing plan is successful?
Well, one of the part of well, we're hoping to increase our recruitment and retention. However, just because somebody sees a sign in a yard or watches a video doesn't mean they're going to choose our schools. So we're trying to find out how we can best communicate with our families. Our last video that we put out that the board saw, I don't even remember how many views it had, but it was wonderful, 2 minutes, heartwarming highlight of why people would want to be in Cave Creek Unified School District. So ultimately, I would hope that we would see some increase of our enrollment. However, it's hard to say that a marketing plan would do that. What we're trying to identify too moving forward is when someone chooses to enroll in our schools, why did they enroll in our schools? To find out that data. Is it just because the school was around the corner? Did you see a great video? Was our website appealing? Did your neighbors talk to you at the barbecue and say Black Mountain is the best school since sliced bread? Or they have the best teachers? So we want to track that data to make sure that our marketing plan is successful. So we put in a lot of efforts. However, we know our enrollment is still slowly declining. However, I think our marketing efforts, we've put our best foot forward. And there's a lot of problems that are bigger than us that are impacting our capture rate. It doesn't help when our politicians stump and beat up public schools. It doesn't help when vouchers are out there and people can choose. And it doesn't help when there's highly competitive schools around us. So somehow we're trying to find that sweet spot to see how can we make sure we get measurable outcomes from our marketing plan and increasing that effort, whether it's word of mouth, whether it's videos, whether it's signage, whether it's websites. How do we meet people where they're at and try to increase that? So again, I wish I had the silver bullet for that. When I talk to the other superintendents from Deer Valley, Scottsdale, and Paradise Valley today, they all tell me everyone's enrollment is down. And so even as superintendents, we talk about what are you doing and what are you guys doing in Deer Valley? You're down 2,000 kids? We're down 200 or what have you. And so we know it's not a unique problem to Cave Creek, but that's what we have to figure out. But we have to have a plan of how we try and go about it.
So will you have, I don't know what you call it because I'm not a marketing person, but you know how in some of that marketing stuff, there is a question that says, how did you find out about us? And word of mouth, online, social media, whatever. Is there a piece in here that will be, whatever that's called?
Yes. Yeah, the answer.
To be able to know.
Yes, that's we're trying to do a better job with our data, and then on that note, for students who are enrolling, also for employees who also choose us. How is it that you chose Cave Creek? How did you find out about us? And you'll see later on in this meeting, we'll even talk about one of the things we'd like to fund eventually is refer a friend. Right? Someone says, hey, you should come and work with us, and that person comes to work with us. We should be able to pay that person, hey, finder's fee, $500 or $1,000. You found us a chemistry teacher, because everyone's kind of beating the hedges. So we'll do the same thing with students. How is it you chose Cave Creek Unified School District? Well, we moved from Iowa. We saw the website, and we were on the school's Instagram, and it looked great.
Because you don't want to waste time on marketing efforts that aren't productive.
Yes.
So if those videos are bringing people in or getting traction.
Yes, and on those videos we have, I don't quote the statistics because I don't know them off the top of my head, but we can look at the views and you can look at the impressions. There's all these different analytics, because we're certainly not going to continue to make videos if people aren't seeing them. But we know from our first one, it already had a huge widespread after just a week or two.
Thank you.
For the fourth bullet point, I know we've got a new director of technology, so I would hope that would be something that to evaluate the district's technology needs. We had a presentation before COVID and the board was told that we were great ahead of the curve, and then COVID hit, and then all of a sudden we didn't have enough bandwidth to turn a light on. So, I mean, I think we've lived through the COVID and the distance learning, so I would hope that we'd see a new evaluation of where we stand district-wide with our new director. So.
Yeah, I remember, Brown. I think that's a very fair point. I agree 100%. We're doing that right now. In the next month or two, we'll have our new laptops ready to go to the high schoolers and middle schoolers, but we certainly don't want to give them to them and have them all crash because we don't have the bandwidth. So, and I'm not going to tell you what you want to hear. I'm going to tell you what you need to know, because that's what we do as a team. So yeah, we're doing that evaluation right now. To see, if we did have to go back to in-home, or if something had to happen where, like Mrs. Scott always talks about, the air conditioner went down at the high school and we have to do online learning at home, do we have the capacity to be able to do that? And so, yeah, Mrs. Celsi is evaluating that right now, and kind of some of the direction Marcy and I have given her is a 3-year technology plan with bond funding, with override funding, and without. You know, we can't just plan on these what ifs. We got to plan for the worst case scenario, and that will be something we'll bring back to the board as a 3-year technology plan that's realistic. It's not pie in the sky. It's not because I heard something on a podcast, but we know what we can do and we know what we can't do, and then we have to increase the capacity. If everyone at Sonoran Trail says, hey, the 300 building is a complete dead spot, we can't get anything there, then we have to address that. You know, we have to look at how do we fix that? I'm not going to come to the board and say, hey, the connection at Sonoran Trails is great. So we are in the process of doing that right now.
Anyone else? All right, goal 5. Well, on that third bullet point, tax credit, if I remember right, I think Black Mountain does a really good job at that, don't they?
Correct.
And I'm curious to know what they do. You know?
Last year was a pretty high year in general. It wasn't our highest in the last 5 years, but it was high. So that goal is going to be a good reach, considering we've lost some enrollment between our big senior class leaving and a smaller kinder class coming. But I'm confident we can do it. Mr. Owsley, one of his strengths is obviously just communication, and making sure parents, you're not only are you told once, but you're told again and you're told again, you know. And so he just understands those principles really well. And a lot of times, that Patty and Nancy can attest to, will even encourage principals to sit with Matt. What is his secret sauce? What is he doing?
Exactly.
You know, because this comes very natural to him, although I know he's learned a lot of these strategies. So make no mistake, that's going to be definitely a reach goal, because last year we were pretty high. We produced a video, if I remember right, Marcy, to educate the parents. We pushed out lots of social media, education sessions, and you even did a finance course on what the tax credit pays for and what it doesn't. So, but yeah, I agree. Mr. Owsley, that's one of his strengths, definitely.
Yeah, kind of like a PLC, let him share the,
Yeah.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. And then again, on 4, I'm hung up on mid-year because, for obvious reasons, if you just do a pre and post and you don't do a mid-year, you know, then you've lost a whole year.
The challenging thing on the parent survey is parents don't like to fill out surveys. You usually get a pretty low percentage, and the survey is a little bit longer. We can take the approach where we can nickel and dime parents and bother them throughout the year with surveys, or we can almost produce one survey that's a little longer. And what I've seen work in other districts is if you just have one survey that's a little longer, because parents don't want to keep doing it every other month. We haven't done this before, frankly. We did do a parent survey with regards to our strategic plan that was really comprehensive, but this survey would be a little different because we want to be able to measure year to year. Does the principal communicates with you in a timely manner? Is it better this year than last year? Principal or teachers respond to my emails in a timely manner. Is it better this year than it was last year? But right now we don't have any of that baseline data for the parent survey, because I'd like it to be very predictable year to year, because I think it's powerful to bring it to the board to show, hey, look, parents think our website is better this year compared to last year and the year before, so let's keep doing that. Whatever we're doing is trending in the right direction. But right now, that's a hard one to quantify because we just don't have that survey done yet. And Mrs. Scott and Mr. Dolezal and I, we just met about this parent survey, and in fact, thinking about even asking our parents, would you consider uniforms at your school? Yes. You know, we heard tonight that sometimes there's various people that are concerned about things that are happening. So let's ask parents and say, what is the temperature? Would they consider uniforms? And how would it come out? So in that survey, it would ask about transportation. It'd ask about how do you get your information. It'd ask about does somebody smile at you when you come into the school? Does somebody answer the phone when you call? Like, we want that data so we can get better. Dr. Hendrickson, one of the wonderful things he's done in the last week or two is every email he sends out, there's a link at the bottom saying, tell us how we can improve. It's kind of like when you're behind a truck on the freeway and it says, call this number and tell us how we can improve. So every time Dr. Hendrickson's there, someone has the opportunity to click and say, hey, by the way, the benefits person was kind of rude to me. Or, it took 3 phone calls for me to get through to the department. So that's the kind of feedback we want to try and start getting from these surveys. But this will be the first one that we do that we can compare against.
That's a really good idea. Yeah, and if I recall, the evaluations, the teacher evaluation and principal evaluations had surveys built into them too, didn't they? So again, this piggybacks up.
They do. They have, President Hatcher, members of the board, they have student surveys, but those are specifically for the teachers. And then there's an actual summary report because we want the teachers to really take that time. We don't want it to be punitive. I know you'd used that word earlier. We don't want it to be punitive against the teacher. We want them to be able to reflect on their practice and to improve that practice. So when they're having that discussion with the administration, it's a summary of the student surveys. It's not literally, the principal doesn't have all of the actual student surveys in front of them. We want the teachers to be able to review that and take that in and self-reflect and see what they need to improve on or what they need to continue doing. It shouldn't be that punitive piece.
Yeah, because as we know, in this small district, it's been very much a feeling of family. The 30 years I've been in this district, and that's important to parents. They want that feeling here and expect that. So it behooves us to know how they feel.
I have one question about the tax credit revenue. I don't know with all the new vouchers. I mean, I think for a married couple, it's been $400 for public school forever. Private school donation has been $800, $1,000. I think they're up to $2,400. With the new voucher program, did they switch any of that, or you can still kind of double dip for private? It'd be nice to Loppy to say, hey, if you're going to keep increasing it there, can you increase it for the public schools as well? Has there been any information about that?
No, we
so
have not
you can still do
received.
both?
Correct.
Probably.
Yes.
Okay.
When you write it off on your state income tax.
Right. Okay.
And you
Maybe
can,
that's something we can talk to legislatures about.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can use that voucher to go to a private religious school too, on top of all of that.
Right. So you're like 7,000 and plus your 2,400. Okay.
Correct. So no, but I think that's a good point. I haven't seen
400
anything.
cap here.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything to what Marcy's commenting on.
Okay.
Dr. Monroe, on the second bullet point, we've attended, I think most of the board members have attended a business partner breakfast. Other than they seem to be well attended. The room up at the Holland Center is fairly full. A nice cross-section of businesses are represented. What's the end game there? What's the end result? We need a plumber. Do we contact somebody who was at the business partner breakfast? Obviously, the construction people that are there, if there's a construction project going on, and they have history of dealing with the district, and we go out for a bid and whatever, yes, we'd get that. But I don't. As I've sat there and I've seen the people in the room, it's nice, and you get to highlight a school. Like we've had Sonoran Trails cheerleaders there once. We had Mrs. Dolezal bring some singers in from the choir. So it's a nice touch to have the students relate to some of those business people. But I guess I don't see what's the benefit, or what are we as the district getting out of that, other than a great breakfast from nutrition.
The idea is to create partnerships for our district, and sometimes you need people to just come into the door and be able to shake hands. We don't necessarily call the plumbers that are at that meeting. We have a bid process, and we always stay above the table. But some of those companies may see that as a way that they can come in and shake Mr. Santina's hand and get to know him. But I'll give you an example just to answer your question. I recently met with Dr. Jensen and a few other staff members to look at our employee recognitions this year. And it's really important that, to me, that we're very resourceful with taxpayer money. And I'd like to not have one penny be paid on some of our recognitions of our staff, if at all possible. So I asked Julia to send out an email to some of our business partners who come to the breakfast, and we had 5, 6, 7 people respond saying, sure, we'd love to sponsor this dinner. We'll sponsor this dinner at $1,000. I'll tell you, that couldn't happen last year. Couldn't happen last year. That now our dinner was sponsored, but even our One Team Excellence Awards. So that's an example where people are ready, where we don't have to go out for a bid, but they'll say, we'd love to sponsor the Classified Employee of the Month schedule. And then if we get $1,000 from them, $1,000 from them, and $1,000, that's $3,000 that we can recognize our employees. So the idea is to build partnerships. It also is to build our increase in the community. We are a community that's proud of local small town business. So I would love for those people to come in and say, how can we work together? Because we want to support you because we know you want to support us. So when we have overrides or bonds, a lot of people in the community, to Mrs. Busby's point she makes all the time, they're not attached to our school. So if they can come in for an hour and a half, we can feed them breakfast. They're a captive audience to see how wonderful our kids are. So that way when they're at home or when they're on the golf course, they can say, hey, actually, I met the principal at Lone Mountain. She's really nice. And they did this awesome patriotic assembly, and they sang the song. So, no, our schools, they do the Pledge of Allegiance. The country is important to them. So I think that's another, is we want to educate the community, our role that we play. And then I also want to provide the opportunity for just networking to occur for our local leaders. Mr. Owsley's doing a wonderful patriotic event next month for Patriots Day. There might be someone who approaches him at that business partner breakfast that says, hey, how can I support that event? That wouldn't happen if we didn't have all in the same room for an hour and a half. So the idea is, can we expand the reach? Can we grow the amount of people that are coming to those so that we can have more opportunities for our kids? So hopefully that illustrates and adds some color to your question.
Anyone else? Okay, no? All right, so I think that does it for, what is this, 6.1. So we'll go to 6.2, revised budget presentation by Ms. Marcy Rodriguez.
Thank you, President Hatcher, members of the board. So this evening, the purpose of this presentation is to give you information about a later action item where we will be asking that you approve the revised budget that we've presented to you. At the time when we adopted our budget back in the end of June, the legislature had not completely got a budget active for us, nor were the forms finalized. So this evening, we're going to bring back a budget that is on the new forms and has new formula included in them. So I want to share some information with you about where we are and some of the assumptions that we've made. Now, our final budget last year, which you approved in May, was moving $2.1 million from our district additional assistance, which typically that's where we fund our capital purchases from, and that ended at $33,204,000. We adopted a budget. This is the budget in June that we adopted that we are asking to revise now. But in this budget, we didn't move any of the district additional assistance to the M&L. So you can see the difference that makes. So when we're revising, we are now putting back the $2 million into M&O from district additional assistance. And there's if you can note the bottom line, additional funding of 1.8. If we didn't move the $2 million, we would be revising downward. Okay. So here's a couple of the things that we are assuming. We're watching our enrollment on a daily basis. We get to that 10-day mark. For those of you who've been in education for a while, that 10-day mark of school means if the students don't show up, then we automatically drop them. We don't always get a call and saying, hey, I'm withdrawing my kid, hey, we're moving to Michigan, so we kind of keep the students on the books until the 10 days. Right now, we are making an assumption that will be losing 230 students. Now, that assumption is based on, we know that we lost 220 students from graduating seniors, which was 471, and incoming kinders. So right off the bat, there was a loss of enrollment because of the difference between the two. But then we have about 35, 36 students that we have not been able to get a hold of. Our front offices have been diligently trying to get a hold of the students. Where are you? Are you coming back? So there could be, the 230 is kind of worst case. We're hoping to get those other 30 students back, so it won't be such a significant enrollment loss. And then the state did increase our base level, and they did increase our district additional assistance, the amount per pupil. So that was the additional funding that everybody was talking about, that we were going to be getting all of this money for increases for whatever you choose as a board. So having said that, I'm going to show you then what that $1.8 million could fund. So first, just want to remind the board that back in March, when we approved the contracts and the salary schedules, these are the things that we have already approved. So we've already approved a 2% across the board to all staff, doctoral, loyalty, and then we increased our insurance contribution. So $504,000 we've already committed. So when we look at what we have additional, the 1.8, if we include the 504, and then we are looking at a 4% additional for all staff. So that will mean a total of 6% for all staff for this year. We need to take into consideration there's some inflationary things. We looked at the gas prices, of course. We know that they've kind of been going up and down. We're seeing some downward trends, so that's kind of a positive. But I think for inflation, for not only gas, but the supplies, we need to make sure we've got that set aside. Minimum wage, we know that that is going to be increasing with an inflationary rate. And for minimum wage is going to be $7,000 for staff that's funded out of M&O. So a lot of our staff that is making minimum wage is in our educational services program, which are self-funded, and in our nutritional program, which is self-funded as well. So very few of our staff that we fund out of our maintenance and operation budget is at that level, but that will be a cost to the district. So having looked at all of that, we received about a 7.5% increase in our budget, okay? And that's just that's keeping the capital where it's at, so we know what's going to happen when we keep, not funding capital. We're seeing some of the results of that. But it's putting 85% of that available funds into staff salaries. It's taking 10% of those available funds and putting that into inflationary increase, and then a 5% just in kind of an emergency fund. So $100,000 on a $35 million budget, $100,000 is not very much to have in the bank for savings. Okay, but we are committed to supporting our staff. We know that we need to continue to compete with other districts, and you'll hear on the news and different districts are offering different types of percentages with the increases. So when Dr. Monroe and I and Cabinet discussed how we wanted to invest the additional money, this is the recommendation that we're bringing to the board and that you'll see reflected in the budget that you're looking at approving tonight.
And let me jump in here, President Hatcher, members of the board. Let me be really clear. This does not close the gap with other school districts. the gap continues. The gap may even get worse. This is why I'm so proud that the board voted 5-0 to put an override on the ballot. We believe firmly that if that override were to pass, salary-wise, we could catch up with Paradise Valley, Deer Valley, Peoria. I'm trying to make sure I get it right, Marcy. However, we'd still lag a little bit behind Scottsdale and Dysart. So I just want you to think about that old saying, a high tide raises all boats. That's what this does, because there's going to be increases given at a lot of districts. Some are maybe less than ours, some are a little more. So on one hand, to be honest with you, I'm very proud because I want our money to be funneled on the classroom, and the main part of the classroom is the teacher who's touching students' lives. However, what you're going to see now is there are bond and capital projects that we've really shortchanged ourselves on, and we've just almost kicked the can down the road. And I want to remind everyone on this slide, this is precisely the reason we went out for a bond last year, and we lost by 751. So we need things like new school buses, we need new stadium turf, new lights, a new resurfaced track, streamlined security cameras across all our schools, and technology infrastructure. And so when something like this happens, I'm really proud we can at least give a 6% to our employees because they're the most deserving, and that's certainly not enough. But I just want the board to know that these needs still exist, and we need to be very creative about how we go about solving these problems, and we will, and I'm confident that we will. But this is the exact reason why we try and educate voters on something like a bond, because as soon as someone gets hurt again on the turf and the seams are coming up and a safety issue is brought up, we don't want that to happen, but we just don't have any fuel in the engine to be able to take care of it. So we've dedicated, what did you say, 85, 90, 85%?
85% to salary, yes. Increases.
Which again, I'm proud of, but I want to be really clear with the board that the next time Danny gets 15 emails about the bus that keeps breaking down, there's no money tree in the back where we can buy that $200,000 bus. And so we have to continue to defer maintenance and fix it up. So it's hard. We're almost robbing Peter to pay Paul, although I am very happy that that our staff and our teachers can get an increased salary. So I just wanted to make that point really clear.
Thank you, Dr. Monroe. And then for future budgeting considerations, so things that we will continue to talk to the board about, future staff raises, which we are hopeful, and thank you again, board, that override will allow us to catch up with some of our competitors and be competitive with our salaries. Paying off the debt, that was something that was on the bond. Performance pay for all employees. This is something that other districts do. They not only give performance pay to their teachers, but they give performance pay to their classified and their administrators. So one team, all in it together, everybody has skin in the game, everybody contributes to the success of our schools. So this is something that moving forward we would like to bring to the board for consideration. And then employee referral program that Dr. Monroe had mentioned earlier has been very successful. And I'll tell you, I think Dr. Hendrickson is going to do some research about how did you hear about us? And we have a lot of employee referrals. Come work for this district. They're awesome. And so I think that would be a great incentive program as well with all the vacancies that could potentially come up with the increases in salary we're seeing in other districts. And then rekeying the high school, we have found that there are some security issues at the high school that we would like to rekey. But again, all of these things cost, and there's a cost to it. And so as a board and as an administration, we have to prioritize. And where do we want to invest the limited funds that we have? But we just want to make sure that the board is aware that there are all of these other ancillary things that we as an administration have to address and are concerned about every day. The bus situation, Dr. Monroe had mentioned a couple of times. I'm telling you, we have 3 buses down right now. They need engines replaced. Our maintenance on our buses is increasing more and more and more. So it's really becoming to a situation where we are concerned about being able to transport our kids back and forth safely. So the next steps will be the governing board will be asked to approve the revised budget based on the information that we've shared with you in this presentation. And then also, if you approve the increase to salaries, then we'll be bringing back revised salary schedules to you at our next meeting. And then, as you know, school districts are funded on current year enrollment, so we see what our enrollment is right now, but in May, we will know what our enrollment has been all year for the 100th day, and we'll bring back a revised budget with the final numbers to you. And with that said, can I entertain any questions that you might have?
At the March meeting, when we approved the 2% to all staff, that was certified, classified, and administration. This 4% also going to those same three areas?
Yes, that is correct, all staff.
Thank you.
On your slide for future budgeting considerations, performance pay for all employees, that includes the superintendent, doesn't it? Or does it not?
President Hatcher, yes. The superintendent already has a performance pay plan in place, so this would be for employees that do not currently have a performance pay option.
Our vision, President Hatcher, members of the board, would, if we could get to a financially solvent point where there's a pay for performance for every single employee classification, whether part-time or full-time, that they could work towards some sort of reach goal. And I've been in another district where that was very effective. From teacher, superintendent, to a person working on the landscaping, transportation, all of those things. So it's something we've bandied around a little bit, but we haven't put too much into it as we're just trying to fight for raises in general.
Yeah, I completely agree and think that everyone should get a performance pay. It shouldn't be just teachers, but the reason why I ask is because every year during performance pay discussion for the superintendent, it tends to come up, is the money there? And I know the money's there. That was a rhetorical question. We wouldn't be doing it if the money wasn't there. So that's why I asked that question.
Yeah, and our teachers have, in essence, through the Classroom Site Fund, they do have money that they can earn at the end of the year that the teachers are well aware of. However, our classified staff does not, or certified professionals might not.
Yeah, it's long overdue. Any other questions for Ms. Rodriguez? All right. Then we'll go to 6.3. Instructional time model, presented by Ms. Nancy Scott.
It's my turn, yay. President Hatcher, members of the board, part of our strategic plan when we look at student success and employee excellence, and as you guys kind of discussed earlier regarding the school priority goals, some of them being the ACT, we had several discussions with the high school principal and then also teachers regarding how ACT went this year and what can we improve on. And one of the pieces that we discussed with some of our past, what did I do? Thank you, She'll Drive. With our districts around us that they completed was this instructional time model where they were able to incorporate some pieces. So with that, I want to talk a little bit about House Bill 2862. That's where the Arizona legislature passed and the governor signed it on April 28th, which allows us an opportunity to have an alternative instructional time model. With that, we had to have 2 public hearings. So this is our first one. At our August 22nd board meeting, we will have our second public hearing regarding the instructional time model. The why behind it in your the board update, I included that why piece. We had over 80% of our students during the 2 late starts call out absent on those days and missed out on school. Then as soon as the ACT and the ACT Aspire were over, then we were inundated with parents calling out their students for the rest of the day. And so we talked with other school districts. What did you do that so that that wouldn't happen? And one of the pieces that came up was that asynchronous kind of model, where during those days where we have ACT and ACT Aspire, for example, on ACT, instead of doing that late start, our students, our 11th graders, would come in and test. What we discovered is with that test, because of all the different components, it's an almost 5-hour exam. And we need best practice, right, Mr. Dolezal, is having a minimum of 2 proctors within the classrooms for, so we would utilize all of our staff for just our 11th grade ACT during that time. So then and then ACT Aspire is 4 hours and 30-minute exam. So we've got 2 exams that are over 4 hours where we're utilizing almost 90% of our staff. And then what ends up happening with a late start, it wasn't enough time. We had to push some of our students into the cafeteria and just house them inside the cafeteria until all of the rest of the students completed testing. So what we're asking for is, with this, with being able to use that alternative instructional time model, what we can do is assign students an assignment within a Google Classroom, and they'd be able to fill out and complete that assignment for that teacher. We would be able to count them as being present that day and receive 100% of that funding. I know Dr. Monroe had mentioned it earlier. I talk about this all the time. If something was to happen at the high school, for example, air conditioning goes out and kids cannot come on campus for one day, right now there's not enough instructional time built into our schedule that we would be able to make that up without having to come back an additional day at the end of the school year. If we had this instructional time model in place, that would not happen. We would be able to instruct our students through our Google Classroom, and we would receive 100% of that funding, and we would not miss out on that school day or have to bring back students at any time. If, again, something was to happen, we'd have to go online. Again, we are prepared for that at any point. And so the requirements for that is, what is our instructional approach? And this would be remote through the Google Classroom for our students. It would include that time. We'd follow that same school schedule, and then tracking attendance would be done during those days through a school assignment. And that is nice, simple, hopefully easy, and I can take any questions that you might have.
So I appreciate the forward thinking from Mrs. Scott. This is a direct result of COVID. So the law has now changed. If you're going to adjust your school calendar at all, the public has to be able to have the opportunity to express their feelings on it. What we're asking for would be 2 early release days, like Mrs. Scott said, where the 11th graders come to school, or whoever's taking the ACT or the ACT Aspire, and the other 3 grade levels do not come to school, but they do online learning from home. It's not live and happening at that time, but they have assignments that they have to do that count for basically going to school. The problem became last year is when we did a late start, when we told the 11th graders to come in and test, and all the other students came at 10 or 11 o'clock, only 20% of them came. And maybe they went to the lake or something. I mean, I might have done the same thing, admittedly. But, and so I think as Mrs. Scott has done some research, a lot of our high schools are doing this. We're not trying to be ambiguous with the dates, but to be honest with you, we don't know the dates. We're always at the mercy, if I'm not mistaken, of ACT. So right now, I can't sit here and tell you it's going to be October 17th, or do we know that yet?
It would be in April,
Oh,
still
okay, it would
about
be in
the same
April.
time. So we're still looking around that April 4th, April 19th time, but they give it just a small window.
So yeah, ACT tells you kind of when it's going to be. So I appreciate the recommendation. I think it's a little bit out of the box thinking, and I think it'll be more efficient for our kids and for our staff to maximize those days, especially because we want our kids to be successful at the ACT, and it takes adults to proctor that exam, and it takes our whole high school staff to proctor that exam for 1 grade level.
Any questions?
No, I just appreciate this. I heard lots of grumblings about that whole situation last year, so thank you.
Thank you.
So the underclassmen freshmen, sophomores that would go to school normally for 6 periods. Will they have 6 different assignments, one for each period, then the seniors 4 to 6, depending on their normal schedule?
Exactly, Member Brown.
Okay. And that will be something in the line of what they're studying in the classrooms. It's not just like do a worksheet and we're done in 5 minutes.
Absolutely. It's going to be completely aligned. It would be just as if they were in class. Instead of doing that classroom assignment on their desk, they're just completing that classroom assignment at home.
It will be interesting to see. The kids may want to come to school after they have 5 or 6 assignments, but I know our staff and our teachers will be great. But yeah, not only is there accountability, but that learning will just continue. It won't be a random worksheet or something that they would do.
Now, you mentioned that we needed the 2 public hearings for this to move forward. This doesn't count as one tonight, right?
It does. So this is our first one. Then our next one will be August 22nd. And then at that meeting, I'll be bringing forward an action item for you to vote on to move forward with the instructional time model.
So it's not the same public hearing as we do with the budget revisions or anything where community members or kids or someone could come up and speak?
We did. We had that at the beginning. President Hatcher opened it up for a call to the public.
Oh, that's right. And there was no comments. That's right.
Yes.
And we'll have one more at the next meeting.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Thank you
Okay.
very much.
Thank you. Moving to item 7, action consent. Is there a motion to approve action consent as presented?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve item 7, action consent as presented. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion carries. Item 7 is approved as presented. Item 8, old business, there is none. Item 9, new business. 9.1, approval of superintendent goals for the 2022-2023 school year, presented by Dr. Court Monroe.
President Hatcher, members of the board, these goals have been discussed at length, not only at this meeting, but at the last meeting. So administration would recommend the board approve the superintendent goals for the 2022 to 2023 school year as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, are there additional questions or comments? Okay, hearing none, it's been moved and seconded to approve item 9.1, approval of superintendent goals for 2022-2023 as presented. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. Item 9.1 has been approved as presented. 9.2, approval of superintendent's performance-based pay resolution, presented by Ms. Marcy Rodriguez.
Yes, thank you, President Hatcher, members of the board. So the superintendent contract and the law requires the governing board to adopt a written plan of performance based as alternative to the statutory plan. Based on your approval of the plan, we move that the governing board approve the superintendent's performance-based pay resolution for the 2022-2023 school year.
So moved.
Sorry.
Second.
Questions or comments?
In section 2, I did see that we have that 10% of his annual base salary. The law is it could be as much as, is it 20?
Yes, that is correct, Member Walker.
That was it.
You're making a point. You're not suggesting anything?
No,
Is that-
just wanted
okay.
clarification.
All right.
Now, that's how the contract's written, the 10%,
Right.
specific
right.
for us. Yeah.
Right. We chose that number.
Yes.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments?
The resolution just satisfies the ARS 15341, correct?
Yes, Member Brown, that is correct.
Anything else? Okay, hearing none, it's been moved and seconded to approve item 9.2, approval of superintendent's performance-based pay resolution as presented. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained. The motion carries. Item 9.2 is approved as presented. Item 9.3, approval of the Third Amendment to Easement Agreement and the Memorandum of Third Amendment to Easement Agreement with Cello or Cello Partnership, DBA Verizon Wireless for the cell tower at Cactus Shadows High School Stadium, presented by Ms. Marcy Rodriguez.
Yes, thank you, Madam President, and members of the board. So we have a cell tower that's been over at the high school for several years, and they have modified it, they have revised it, they have added additional, as you know, technology advances quite often, and cell phone companies want to keep up on the latest technology. They have revised the existing tower so much to where their engineers won't approve any more additions to that tower. They are asking to move it 6 feet from where it currently is. And I would ask the governing board to approve the amendment, the third amendment to the easement agreement and the memorandum. Both of these agreements have been reviewed by our legal.
So moved.
Second.
Questions? Ada?
On the memorandum, item number 5. Agreements currently scheduled to expire October 31 of 2026 for a period beginning upon November 26 through and including October of 2031. And then we can give them another additional 5 years after that 2031 date? Or
Yes.
is that 2026 and in 5 years to get to 2031?
We will come back for the additional, approving this evening will approve it through 2031.
Okay. And then the current tower, or excuse me, the current light pole belongs to the district, correct?
Yes, if I may ask, Mr. Santini is here. Mr. Santini is here. He can answer that question. If you could come to the podium, please.
President Hatcher, members of the board, Dr. Monroe, yes, that's our property.
So they're going to move, or they're going to put a new monopole just 6 foot off from that. But then in the documentation, it says, then we're going to put lights on it?
It's already got lights, so they're moving our whole light tower over 6 feet.
The light tower that they say can't support any more
Well, they're putting a new
enhancements?
pole in with our existing
Okay,
lights.
and they're just moving our lights over with it. Okay, that was a little confusing
And then
in the
they'll have a light
documents.
survey and they'll adjust the lights properly.
I know I'd asked the question to Dr. Monroe. This has been in the works for almost 2 years from the answer. Was there any consideration given to moving that pole so it would be in that same general area within, I know they've got a couple of easements back there, but something that wouldn't be where we could move the light pole to behind the bleachers or
Not in
beside the
their current- Not in their
bleachers?
current easement.
Okay.
We did look, but it wasn't possible behind the bleachers because that's where their generator's at. And with all
Yeah.
the electrical underground, it just wasn't.
So they're just going to extend that underground electrical just to 6 feet to the north
Yeah.
to put the new pole up? Okay. And then, and maybe this is a question for Ms. Rodriguez, we get some sort of rental payment from Verizon?
Yes, that is correct. They do pay a monthly lease fee for using our property.
Okay, very good. All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Santina.
Any other questions? Okay. Hearing none, it's been moved and seconded to approve item 9.3, approval of the Third Amendment to easement agreement and the memorandum of the Third Amendment to easement agreement with Celco Partnership, DBA Verizon Wireless for the cell tower at Cactus Shadows High School, as presented. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstained. Motion carries. Item 9.3 is approved as presented. 9.4, approval of the fiscal year 2022-2023 revised budget, presented by Ms. Marcy Rodriguez.
Yes, thank you, President Hatcher, members of the board. As presented earlier, we are recommending that the governing board approve the district revised budget for the FY 22-23 as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Are there questions or comments?
I do. With this, you said the new salary schedules would come out at the next board meeting. I would kind of like to see that. Seems like our biggest gap is at that certified and classified pay rate for teachers. Just how all those salaries are going to change to see, what amount. I mean, 4% on a higher salary is more than 4% on maybe a classified staff salary.
Correct. So every existing employee will get the 4%. So what it will look like on our salary schedules is we have a placement schedule. So it's just going to be that starting placement amount that will be increased 4% that then we'll use to gear when we hire new employees from. So increasing that to make sure, because you're right, we want to stay competitive. So in order to do that, we need to increase the starting salary for our placement schedule. Is it going to get us to where we need to be competitive? It will not, because of the other districts will be giving, 4%, 5%, 6%, whatever that looks like for their district. But at least we'll be able to honor the work that our current employees are doing for us by giving them a little additional money.
Well, we gave them the 2% back in March. So now the 4%, so now we've given them, now the increase is 6% starting this school year.
That is correct.
And that's not just raising the floor, that's for everybody within each division of salary structure.
That would be correct.
Okay.
And that's retro back to day one, right?
Yes, we will be recalculating what the full year salary will be with that additional 4%, and then we will add that spread across the next, because they've already gotten a paycheck or two for the year.
Do they know this? They've been.
I think there's been, once this got posted, there
Yeah.
was a lot of chatter about the hopes that you would approve this evening.
You know this, guys? Yeah, I know you do. Okay, good. Are there additional questions or comments? All right. Hearing none, it's been moved and seconded to approve item 9.4, the fiscal year 2022-2023 revised budget is presented. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. Item 9.4 is approved as presented. Woohoo!
Yes, President Hatcher, members of the board, let me just state the obvious. I'm very proud as a superintendent to again work with a board that 5-0 not only voted for teachers and staff to get a 2% increase, but now has voted for a 4% increase, making it 6%. We know that doesn't close the gap. However, I'm very proud that this board values our employees and our hardworking teachers and all the people in our organization. And so I just wanted to call that out. In addition, I'd like to just call out as well, the same board voted 5-0 to support an override, which is where we can really do a lot of damage and catch up. And so on behalf of the employees of the school district, I thank each one of you governing board members for your vote.
All righty. 9.5. Approval of the 2022-2023 qualified evaluators presented by Dr. Frank Hendrickson.
President Hatcher and Governing Board, each year we bring to you a list of all personnel who are approved as qualified evaluators. This is our first group that we're presenting. We have our new administrators that will be going through their qualified evaluator training in the coming weeks, so we'll be bringing them back to you at a future meeting. So at this time, we recommend that the Governing Board approve the 2022-2023 qualified evaluators as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or comments?
Dr. Hendrickson, you said this is the first list. You'll be adding more, like our mentor teachers will be included, or?
So not the mentor teachers. So all evaluators have to go through either through ADE or ASA will put it on a qualified evaluator training. So learning the ins and outs of whatever instrument you're using, what are the aspects of the evaluation. The next round will have all of our new administrators, so our new APs and our new principal at DSA.
Okay,
Yep.
Thank you.
Any other comments? All right, hearing none, it's been moved and seconded to approve item 9.5, approval of 2022-2023 qualified evaluators as presented. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. Item 9.5 has been approved as presented. Item 9.6, affiliation agreement between Ball State University and Cave Creek Unified School District, presented by Dr. Hendrickson.
President Hatcher and Governing Board, as we continue to aggressively create pipelines of employees, from time to time we will get different universities reaching out with placement for student teachers. And so Ball State University reached out to look at doing a student teacher placement. This is actually going to be someone who's looking at one of the Spanish immersion programs. So we have to have these agreements in place. The great thing about our student teacher placements is 100% of the student teachers that were with us last year have all been hired in our district. And so this is definitely a source that we're going to continue to tap into. So at the time, we recommend that the governing board approve the affiliation agreement between Ball State University and Cave Creek Unified School District as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or comments?
Usually when we see these, and this is just me, it's noted on the front page, agreement's been reviewed and approved by our attorney, and usually we'll get the attorney's signature.
She has. I apologize. She has done that. Yes.
Okay. So who reviewed this?
Jennifer McClellan.
With Jennifer.
Yep.
And then it was also the same on item 9.3, and I'm assuming it was Jennifer on that also.
The easement.
Oh, for the easement.
On the South Tower, it was one of her associates in her office that does contract review.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. I'm waiting for you to bring a Purdue contract to us.
They've got a great ed program.
Yeah. All right. Any other?
Well, they're close. I mean, they're at Muncie.
They're getting there.
They're getting there.
Yep, that's right. Additional comments or questions? All right. Hearing none, it's been moved and seconded to approve item 9.6, affiliation agreement between Ball State University and Cave Creek Unified School District as presented. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained. The motion carries. Item 9.6 is approved as presented. Number 10, future agenda items. There are none. Number 11, upcoming calendar events, presented by Dr. Court Monroe.
President Hatcher, members of the board, on September 5th, schools and district office will be closed for Labor Day. On September the 19th, we'll have our inaugural Golf the District, sponsored through the Cave Creek Unified Education Foundation at Tatum Ranch Golf Course. And then on the 21st, we'll have our first business partner breakfast of the year. The board is always welcome to attend those. That'll be at the Holland Center on the 21st. In the future, we may have to look at other places if we do outgrow the Holland Center to find a big enough room. So those are our future agenda items.
That's a good problem.
Future calendar items, sorry.
Thank you. Number 12, adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Meeting is adjourned.